Good afternoon and welcome to Cambridge County Council's Children and Young People's Committee. The County Council allows filming and photography during its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures or share on social media during this meeting. Please though, can everyone present turn their mobile phones and other devices to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. We have no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I'll adjourn the meeting and we'll leave the room by the side doors and use the external fire exit and assembly in the car to the assembly point in the car park in the rain. I'd like to remind everyone present this meeting will be live streamed and a recording will be placed on the council's website, and we will adjourn every 2 hours for a short comfort break as needed. Item one is changes to committee membership. Rishenda, could you take us through these, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Coutts was appointed to the committee on the 13th of March 2024, and Councillors Goldsack and Gowing were appointed on the 28th of March. They succeed Councillors Costello, Jonas King, Prentice. Apologies, February.
Unless we've moved to April without me noticing, which is entirely possible. Thank you. I'd like to welcome Councillor Coutts, Goldsack and Gowing to this committee. They were all previously substitute members and hopefully already familiar with committee's business. And I'd also like to place on record the committee's thanks to Councillors Costello, King and Prentice for all of their contributions to this committee's work. Item two is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Rishenda, are you all right to take us through those?
I shall. Apologies from Dr. Stone, representing the Roman Catholic Diocese of East Anglia.
Thank you. Would any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest this afternoon? Councillor Bradnam.
I have tried to take advice, but I haven't quite got round to discovering whether I have an answer yet, which is that item 6 on education contracts mentions early years provision as part of the procurement operation in Milton, which is a village that I represent. And I wanted to check whether I need to declare a non-pecuniary interest in that at all. Richenda's saying no, so I won't. Thank you.
So moving on to the minutes of the meeting on the 16th of January as an accurate record. Any comments, questions, queries, or does everyone agree with the minutes? I'll take that as an agreement. An updated minutes action log was included in the published papers, and a further update on the phonics pilot project has been circulated to all committee on the 6th of March. Any questions on the action log? Councillor Bradnam.
I think it just started to work. Okay, I just wanted to check on the action log at page 9 of the agenda pack. There was a section about asking that local members should be informed about plans for early years provision in their area. Excuse me, and district level briefings were due to be arranged, and I wondered what the progress has been with arranging those. Thank you.
So I think we discussed it, certainly, I can't remember if we discussed it here. Rather than doing district level, we will talk to smaller groups rather than district level, because as our districts are quite large, we'd end up with huge discussions over numerous facilities. So members will be contacted and that will be discussed, but on a slightly more local level than district. Thanks. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. There was a point on the action log. I'm sorry, I had it on my screen and lent on it. There you go. It's minute 172. I noted it. I think it came from the previous meeting in October. Could I have a copy of the report that was supposedly published as a result of it? This is the Essex-led improvement investigation. And 2, I guess we're post. what's the phrase? We're post the evaluation period now as to where we're at. Is that something that's not in today's minutes? Is that something that's to be discussed in the future?
Yeah, we're in the middle of our Ofsted inspection at the moment. So the future committee, once the report's been published, that will be available here, and will be available to everybody to read, and we'll bring it here as well.
On the report, I don't recall getting a copy of that as a sub. May have done, but I don't. It's not one. Not one that I recall. So if 172 was the Essex-led improvement, should have concluded in January. A full report will be shared with members as soon as it is available.
We haven't received a full report, and it's been superseded by the arrival of Ofsted, so that will give us the ultimate assessment of where we are. So that report's published on the 30th of April.
So that's a very good point then. So this was back in October, so the full report wasn't due until January. The Ofsted report has jumped that. So any time in that spent on the Essex-led report has resulted in what?
The Essex report, the Essex work started in October. It concluded in January. We're followed by 2 learning events for staff that finished in February. And Essex haven't provided a full report from that. They provided a summary of their interventions, and they provided detailed reports for each of the teams that they visited rather than an overarching report. In the interim period, Ofsted was announced. So we're now in that inspection period right now.
So just so that I'm clear, and apologies, Chair, for taking up so much time at the start of this. So we engaged with the Essex-led report to give us a steer and some feedback to be ready for the Ofsted report, but the Ofsted report kind of jumped that. So there's no, I can't see any benefit.
Forgive me, sorry, I spoke while your microphone was on. The Essex work influenced a lot of our improvement work from them. We didn't wait till Essex had completed before we started implementing improvement strategies, including our big 6 practice priorities, which were launched well in advance of in November, as soon as the trends were emerging from the feedback from them, from Essex, from the Voices of Children and Young People, and from our own quality assurance work. So it's been really, really helpful in actual fact. And without a report that came to come here, it's actually influenced a lot of our improvement activities. So it has been really valuable for us, and it was funded by the Department of Education.
If I can just add that it's not a single report in that, it's a 4-month process, which will result in a report that we can bring here, but it's more than a sort of single intervention, if that makes sense. Thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to check on the minutes at item 1931 Roman 4. It says that the care home, I've paraphrased, the decision on the residential care home would come back to the committee, but I can't see that. I might just be missing it in the action log.
It will come to committee as a report, so it's not an action log, it's in the committee agenda planning.
So have we any idea when that will come back? Martin?
That piece of work's going on at the moment, looking at that exactly where that we're writing that report at the moment. As soon as it's available, it will come back to committee. Hopefully it will be available for the next committee.
In which case, can we take the minutes action log as noted? Seeing nods.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 4. Item 4 is petitions and public questions. We have 1 public question this month from Councillor Lara Davenport-Ray and 1 request to speak by Councillor Tierney as a local member. Welcome, Councillor. You have up to 3 minutes to ask your question. As you know, we use the traffic light system as a guide for our public speakers. The light will turn green when you start to speak, and when you have 30 seconds left, it will turn to amber, giving you a chance to conclude your remarks. If you're still speaking when it turns red, please finish your question. I will then ask members of the committee if they have any questions of clarification only on what you've said. There is no report on this issue on today's agenda, so there will be no debate, and there is no opportunity for you to ask a supplementary question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Councillor Lara Davenport-Ray. I'm a district councillor and I look after St. Neots East. When I talk to residents in my ward, the most popular topic that they want to discuss with me is the Estrella Academy Trust. And the many young people and parents who interact with that trust are not able to come and join you today because of the time of day that you meet. They're literally at school and they're at work. So I've gathered together some of their feedback that I wanted to share with you. Much of the feedback I received falls into three categories. The first is the school's behavior policy. The second is the class sizes following the departure of many staff. And the third is the deteriorating school facilities. Now, Ofsted has recently visited the Long Sand site specifically, so I will leave the first two topics until we have their review published. And I'll focus on the deteriorating school facilities today. Students in Long Sand and many of their parents are not able to join you, so here are some of the things that they would share with you if they could be. One Long Sand student explained to me that the school feels really dirty, especially the toilets. We have one new set of toilets, but I don't feel comfortable using it. When you're inside, you're too visible to others. There's only one set of toilets at school that I can use where I feel comfortable. Another Long Sand student said that she doesn't drink at all during the day in order to avoid using the toilets. This is a result of two worries. First, not wanting to use the unisex toilets, which are in a filthy state. Second, the fear that toilets will be unavailable because some toilets have been deemed out of bounds and the rest are too crowded as a result. A local parent told me the state of the buildings at Long Sands is unacceptable. The school site feels very neglected. The sports changing rooms feel like a step back in time. After many decades of hard use and various haphazard extensions, the site feels like it's being held together by a thread. Locals who attended the school decades ago see little improvement since when they attended. It must be very difficult to keep a building clean and warm when it is crumbling around the students. Without clean, warm, and safe buildings to learn in, how can we expect our young people to focus on learning and succeed in education? The St. Neots Youth Council met in February and decided they wanted to pose questions to local elected officials. The very first question on their list was, what are elected people doing to support students at the Estrella Academies? In May of last year, I met with Estrella's Trust-wide Chief Finance Officer. He explained that Long Sand site has received significantly more capital funding than the Trust's other school sites. Their GAG funds are pooled by the Trust and more is spent at Long Sands than any of their other sites. This recently included, between 2018 and 2022, 2.6 million spent by Estrella just on the Long Sand site. This is an untenable situation, and the member of this committee have a duty to support and protect the children and young people in Cambridgeshire. The young people attending those academies are asking you for help. What will you do to support them?
Thank you. Do we have any questions, committee, of clarification only for Councillor Davenport-Ray? No. Oh, sorry. Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, you mentioned about the local elected members. I just wondered what conversations you've had with them and how that's progressed.
So recently, the local elected members went on a visit to the site to view some of the facilities that had been raised as concerns both by parents and children. We don't have an outcome to that visit yet, but I'm enthusiastic about the conversation that started.
Thank you. Councillor Hay, please.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that between 2018 and 2022, 2.6 million had been spent on capital improvements. Do you know what capital improvements were made? Because by the sound of it, what you're saying is 2.6 million was never, ever going to be enough.
So that I know in 2022, 600,000 was spent on heating and the heating systems and 200,000 on doors and windows. So I think capital is being spent on the underlying items that you need to keep the building afloat, but that isn't resulting on a better experience for the students.
Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you for coming and speaking to us on behalf of the youngsters who are being educated at the school. I do appreciate it. Can you just tell us how long has the school been in with Estrella Trust?
I don't know the exact year, but I would think it's less than 10 years.
I think that's everyone who wanted to ask. Thank you very much for coming to join us today and speaking on behalf of your residents, parents and young people. You will receive a written response to your question within 10 working days. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting should you wish. Thanks. So next, we've also received a request to speak from Councillor Steve Tierney on his capacity as local member for Wisbech West. The Constitution states that any county councillor who wishes to attend a meeting of a committee or subcommittee of which they are not a member will be entitled to do so, and that with consent of the meeting, they will be entitled to speak but not vote on any matter affecting their electoral division or its inhabitants. Unless there are any objections, I'll assume that we're happy to hear from Councillor Tierney this afternoon. Marvellous. Under the rules of debate, members can speak for up to 5 minutes. We will use the traffic lights as a guide, and committee members will have the chance to ask again questions of clarification only, but we will have no debate on this subject. Councillor Tierney, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for giving me the time to speak today. I'm the representative for Wisbech West, as you know, and you will all be aware that Wisbech is one of the most deprived areas in Cambridgeshire and indeed the whole of the country. And a section of my ward, the Waterleys ward, which has recently changed its name for part of it, but that's neither here nor there, is the most deprived in Cambridgeshire and in the top 5% or something of the whole country. We've all talked about it, so we know that. And I make this point because hopefully it will help make clear why I'm coming for your help. Because I was recently asked to join the Friends of the Spinney, which is an adventure playground in Waterleys that serves the children in that deprived ward and indeed wider Wisbech. And you'll know of Friends groups that we help with promotion and funding and building the community around the thing that you're friends of. So at my first meeting, I was surprised to find that the main point of business was to try and raise funding, not funding for anything special or unusual, but just for general play equipment. Now, recently, the Spinney has been the benefit of grant funding to produce a new sports centre, not sports centre, sorry, children's facility, like a building for youth facilities. And that's great, brilliant. And they're building that. That's going to be happening, and that will be there within the year, I hope. The trouble is, it will be a youth facility with no play equipment virtually, because recently a lot of the play equipment was condemned. It was so old it had reached the end of its life and it was taken out. And what remains is mostly in a pretty bad state too, so it won't be far long in following. And their main business was to try and find how they were going to get funding to replace the equipment. Now, this is a county council playground, owned and operated by county council. And it just was amazing to me that they were desperately looking for ways to find funding for the play equipment that obviously, to me, the county council should be replacing because it's their playground. And so I said I would come to this committee because it might just be that somehow this has been overlooked or perhaps has passed down, or perhaps the wrong information has been given, and to try and elicit your support in just making sure that this important playground in a deprived ward that desperately needs help for young people, and I stress it's great what they would do. The work they do is brilliant. The staff there, they help feed kids sometimes who arrive hungry. There's a lot of learning goes on. There's a lot of interaction. It's a very community-minded place. I've got lots of time for the work they do. But if there's no play equipment they're worth playing on, the kids are going to stop coming, new youth centre or not. So I'm asking you, would you please throw your support behind just saying to County Council, £90,000 is the kind of price tag they've come up with for what they want. It's a lot of money to our community, but in the scheme of County Council, it's not so much. And I feel it's something we should be doing anyway, as a matter of course. So I guess I'm just saying, please support us. Please talk to the officers and say, look, let's stop asking and begging for money from other organisations and funds. They can do that as well for extra equipment, but let's fund the basic replacements we need from County Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of clarification? Councillor Slatter first, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yes, it's surprising to find it's a county council one, isn't it? It's the sort of thing you expect to be run by the city or the district councils. So given it is one of our assets, it is hopefully on the radar of our property and assets review. And I think you've alerted us to what we might expect to see on the list, but hopefully that is one way in which it will be approached. So I just checking, you're nodding. So I'm just wanting to make sure that that would be where, from the officer's point of view, Chair, that the decisions would be made.
Subject to conversations, yes. Councillor Daunton, please.
Thank you. Thanks very much for putting us in the picture, Councillor Tierney. Do you know how long the playground has been in the possession of the County Council? And secondly, just for clarification, are you seeking to replace what's there? Outdated equipment, you're seeking to replace it?
Yeah, so it's not my plan. It's a plan put together by officers and volunteers who are there. I've literally just attended my first meeting. But the equipment was condemned, I think, last year when it was inspected and it just reached the end of life. And they're not replacing it like for like because play changes and what kids expect to see changes. But it is very similar sort of equipment. I think it's a big climbing apparatus they want, which replaces something that used to be there that perhaps has fallen out of fashion. But it is broadly like for like to keep it as a viable play place for young people to go and enjoy. So I don't think there's anything special or new being required. And 80 or 90,000 pounds, you'll all have seen the cost of play equipment. This is not an unreasonable amount for what we're talking about. Thank you.
So, how long it's been in the possession of the County Council?
I don't remember the whole history, but it's certainly been a county council site, I believe, as long as I've been a councillor, many years. Whether county council originally built it, I'm sure they did actually, but my memory fails because it's quite a long time ago.
Councillor Hoy, please.
Yes, thank you. I think it would just be useful for people. I've got two parts really to my question because it was a playground. Obviously, there was some lights and CCTV, and now I understand the county council have pulled out of the CCTV on the site, and they've removed a lot of the play equipment. And I just wondered if perhaps, because I know a lot of people wouldn't have been there, because obviously, you know, you don't go to everywhere that you're not a member for. I understand that. So I just wondered if perhaps you could explain to the committee kind of what it looked like maybe 2 years ago and what it looks like now. Obviously not exactly, but just roughly.
Yeah, so it looks a lot emptier now because lots of the equipment that the kids really liked really wasn't safe anymore just because it had got that old. Nothing had happened to it. It just got old and it's had to be decommissioned and taken down because it was dangerous now. It was deemed that it was about to be dangerous. So it was very end of life. So it just looks a lot sadder than it did. And when it first appeared, it was an amazing facility. It, you know, it wowed everyone. It was a big, over a decade ago, I think now. Yeah, all the cameras have gone. They were originally put in because communities were a bit concerned that it might attract youths in the evening, and so it was put in to make people feel safer. And broadly, a lot of the big worries haven't happened, but that may have been because there were cameras there. I don't know, but it now looks a sorry version of its old self. It's still well loved and it's still visited, and there is still some equipment, but it's only a matter of time until even that equipment reaches the end of its life.
Thank you. I think I've seen everybody, in which case, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. You will receive a written response within 10 working days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Feel free to stay for the afternoon, should you so wish. Item 5. Item 5 is the Cambridgeshire Holiday Voucher Scheme or Free School Meal Scheme. This report will be introduced by Helen Gregg, our Head of Education Operations. I think it's the first time you've sat in that seat. You're normally watching online. So welcome, Helen, and please can you introduce this report for us?
Thank you. So Helen Gregg, Head of Education Operations, and I've taken over responsibility of the Cambridgeshire Holiday Voucher Scheme from about February of this year. So we have brought this report to you on previous occasions, and we're now into our 5th round of the holiday vouchers. There is a continued commitment from Cambridgeshire County Council to support with this scheme, and hopefully you'll be aware of agreement by full council in February to continue to fund the scheme for 24-25. If I can draw your attention to section 3.4, where we list the voucher amounts per school holiday, I just would like to point out that after reconciling February half-term vouchers, additional funding has been identified to increase the Easter voucher amount to £30 instead of £25. So the revised total per eligible child will be £140 for ages from 2 to 19. So that's for the 24-25 period, £140. You may also be aware that the government announced last week, though, they will be extending the Household Support Fund for another 6 months, which is really great news. I understand at this point that allocation of that funding will be discussed at March's Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee. We are hopeful some funding from that allocation will be used to further support the holiday voucher scheme and hopefully enable us to increase the voucher amount. So I'm here today in terms of the proposal to continue based on the same arrangements as previous and seeking approval to continue to operate as previously delivered based on the same eligibility criteria. We do have to re-procure. So if I can refer you to section 3.11, we are currently going through this procurement process and again seek committee members' support to procure based on a 3-year arrangement in line with funding reached by full council. And then finally, I'd just like to draw your attention to Appendix 1, which details feedback from parents. We conducted a survey and there's a range of comments to the questions that we raised. And that's centred around the impact this scheme has made to them and the lives of their children. I have pulled out a couple of comments which I really thought summarised how the scheme impacts the lives of our families. One parent put, I have found it helped me to know that I had the food voucher to spend on my children during the holidays. Without this, I would have struggled to make sure they ate enough. And the other one, it has helped tremendously. I cannot express how much the scheme has helped the past few years. It ensures my kids have healthy food and enough to eat during the holidays without giving the bare minimum food. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bradnam first, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your presentation of the report. You've said that given that the government is extending the household support fund for 6 months, you're hoping that the way you can use that money is to increase the amounts available, which is admirable. But what I noted in a lot of and thank you very much for providing all the lived experience comments that came out of this. I found it very moving. And what came up in a number of the areas were, I'll just read you from the first section. We've only been getting them from this year as I was on working tax credit and receiving less money than I am now on universal credit. So I'm glad my children now qualify. My general point is, excuse me, is there any way that we can extend eligibility to parents who are earning but are on very, the working poor, who are struggling, even though they're on benefits or even though they're on some kind of support, they haven't got quite enough. There were several places. Yes, here we are. I'm not eligible for any other financial support as a single parent living in South Cambridgeshire on a very low income. The supermarket vouchers have been a huge help. So that's somebody who has got it, but then there are people who are just not eligible for one reason or another. And I wondered if we could look at that at all.
So I think in terms of the holiday voucher scheme, that's based on those children and young people eligible for the free school meals. That's how we work out that side of it. In terms of the household support fund, obviously that has its criteria that's mentioned in the guidance, and that is available to low income families. So I would suggest maybe I could feed back to whichever officers presenting to the Strategy Resource Performance Committee to include that in their report, if that would be agreeable.
Thank you very much. Can we hold that as possibly an action point for the end if the members agree?
I mean, there is obviously, as Helen's mentioned, there is the household support fund, which is much wider and doesn't have the strict criteria of the vouchers. I think the answer to increasing the eligibility would be it's very carefully crafted in terms of numbers. So we can't add in more children without possibly reducing the voucher value over the year. So it's difficult.
It's the extra 6 months that the government has undertaken to.
Yeah, that decision is going through strategy, resources and procurement, but as I'm sure you can imagine, Councillor Atkins and I are making protestations in terms of where we feel some of that money should be allocated.
Okay.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Daunton next.
Thank you. Thanks for the report and your very clear presentation. You particularly drew our attention to, and I can't get my page to move, where you asked the committee to consider a number of issues. I'll pick up a couple. Interlink with the holiday activities and food scheme. Maybe you could just say a little bit more about that. And that you've passed feedback to the HAF scheme. If you could just sort of elaborate on that section. Also, I comment on the concerns around the quality of school meals. I'm glad that you're passing that back to schools. I think that's really important. And the need to publicise the wider scheme. And you say you're looking at further communication around this. Maybe you could just elaborate on that point as well, please.
So in terms of the HAF scheme, the holiday, I think it's activity. Yeah, I'm not actually involved in that side of the scheme. So if okay, would I be able to come back and respond to your question in terms of more detail on that? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and so what was the follow-up question?
Somebody else?
Oh, now it's okay. Now it seems to be working. Sorry, didn't mean to shout. Yes, so the quality of school meals and that you're going to feed that back to schools. I think that's really important, and the need to publicise the wider scheme. Yes, if you could just comment on that, that would be great. Thank you.
So we are working with our communication colleagues about the different approaches that we can take to further promote the scheme. Obviously, we're in close contact with schools to ensure all of their children that are eligible for free school meals are pulled together so that we can assure all children get a voucher. We do release a press release in terms of following council if it's approved to inform parents of this as well. In terms of the household support fund, we would need to link in with our colleagues that are coordinating that fund to ensure we've got the wider communications available to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bulak, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report and including all this feedback. There are so many really insightful comments, but one of them really stayed with me. And it said that some weeks the holiday vouchers, and I quote, have been the difference between eating beans on toast and actual food. And although I have to admit I do enjoy eating beans on toast sometimes, it's very quick to prepare in the morning. I actually sat and read this and thought, how can this be the only choice that some children have in such a wealthy economy worldwide? And I think that's really, unacceptable to have so many more and more families being in a situation. And it's really reflected in the report as well, saying that the numbers are have been increasing by 20% since October 2021. And that to me is quite a huge increase in terms of just the needs there. So I'm really, really pleased that we're able to continue with this scheme because it's really clear that it's needed, and it is even more needed in the last 2 or 3 years than perhaps it has been in the past. I wanted to ask about the unclaimed vouchers as well, in terms of what are the plans to perhaps increase the number of people. Of course, the vast majority of people do claim what they're entitled to, but I was wondering what are some of the perhaps reasons behind, and how can we reach out to people who are entitled and are not claiming what they're entitled to. And then I also wanted to ask in 3.9, it does say, and I think that's why we have to also be particularly proud about decisions we're making in this council, is that it's unlikely that any neighboring authorities will provide this scheme. And how does it work with perhaps like kind of cross boundary and perhaps people who live just outside the boundary who might be confused about whether this applies to them or not. And then finally, my final question is around if you can tell the committee a bit more about how this particular scheme fits into the wider anti-poverty strategy. Of course, we spoke about the holiday activity fund, the household support fund, and on the household support fund itself, I do know that this will be decided at strategy and resources in terms of how the 6 months extension by the government will be allocated. But I really do hope at least we can consider perhaps having at least for the next 6 months. That's the issue with those short-term government decisions. But at least for the next 6 months, considering having the vouchers at the same level, because the reality is the cost of living is continuing at the same rate, even more. So what we're saying here is that we're actually reducing the amount of funding because of the budget constraints. So since the government committed for the additional 6 months, it would be good to explore. Again, I realize this is maybe outside the scope of this committee, strategy and resources, but whether it would be feasible to have the same rate of the vouchers as well. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of unclaimed vouchers, so we do go through a process in terms of the vouchers. So we initially issue, but then we follow up with a reminder to parents for those that haven't claimed. And then also the provider sends out weekly communications to those families that haven't claimed. And actually just from the February half term, we've seen a considerable percentage drop in the number of unclaimed vouchers due to the provider also supporting with that follow-up with parents who haven't claimed. So that's we're really seeing some progress there. And obviously for any unclaimed vouchers, we can bring the funding back in and use at the end if there is any available to further extend. In terms of cross-boundary, obviously, we do our best to signpost families that do come through that aren't within the Cambridgeshire boundary to their areas if they're doing sort of a household support fund. So that's what we do there. In terms of how the scheme fits into the poverty strategy, again, we do our best to signpost to support services available to families that may be not eligible, etc. But I would like to come back just on a bit more detail in terms of how it feeds into the wider poverty strategy, if that's okay. And then obviously you've mentioned about increasing the voucher amount. If there is the possibility of receiving some of the funding from the 6 months additional amount, then we absolutely would look to increase the voucher amount if that's possible.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. You mentioned in section 3.4 that you've been able to put the Easter amount back up to £30, but you've just explained in a response to, I think it was Councillor Boulat, that you had an increase in take-up of vouchers in the past half term. Can you explain the mathematics as to how you've had more response, yet you've got more money left to actually increase the future payment?
So again, it comes back to this reconciliation of the vouchers. So for the unclaimed vouchers, where we're able to cancel the vouchers, that frees up the money. So we're able to, that money that was left over, we've been able to increase the amount there for the Easter voucher.
So by inference then, if we have the same amount of unclaimed vouchers for Easter, I recognise the longer the holiday, the more likely there is for people to apply, according to the report. The chances are this could do the same and reciprocate, and actually your voucher value could go up each time.
It is a fluid process in terms of how we go through from initially submitting the vouchers and then what's left over. So there is always the potential that there may be funding left over towards the end of the year that we can then push into the voucher amounts.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Coots, please.
Hope you'll forgive this is a rookie question and a very obvious thing. Are these vouchers as good as cash to the houses that have them? I'm thinking particularly in terms of the loyalty schemes run by supermarkets. There's no restriction on use of these, that they can't be used with loyalty cards for lower prices.
I'm not sure about the loyalty schemes, I'm afraid, for each supermarket as such, but that, you know, they're used to contribute it. So as they go through the till, they can use their voucher amount at the end, if that makes sense. So I don't know how that works with feeding into the loyalty schemes at all, but if possible, I can try and find that out. I guess it will depend on each supermarket as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. It just, it's probably fine, but it's just worth checking. You don't want people in receipt of benefits like this to find themselves cut off from the sort of prices that other people can access, because that would just be counterproductive.
Once a voucher is downloaded, it can be used just like any other supermarket gift card voucher. So yes, it does work with, I'm not going to mention any of the loyalty schemes, but all of the loyalty schemes that are available. And some of the supermarkets have restrictions on what the voucher can be used for example, not petrol, and some of them don't. Some can be used online and some are in-store only. But that's all given as information to the parents, and often they will use their most convenient or local supermarket. Any further? Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of the comments on the feedback pointed out that the vouchers weren't usable at all retail outlets, and they mentioned some supermarkets that they said they weren't available at all. And we in the report, it said that work was still ongoing with, and 2 were named. I just wondered how progress is going with those 2 supermarkets that don't currently take the vouchers.
We are still progressing with those conversations, so I'm unable to confirm at the moment whether we've reached an agreement, but we are working hard to increase the number of available supermarkets that we can use.
Councillor Hoy, please.
Thank you. This isn't a question, it's more of a statement really. I haven't got issue with the scheme as a whole. With people talk often about inflation, but we don't always look at inflation in all areas. I know it might be 4 or 5% in some places, but in a lot of food items, we increased by over 100%. I think we've all probably noticed the cost of our weekly shop has increased drastically. So I think that is, a big thing, and I do think the scheme is definitely much needed. I just wanted to make a little bit of a comment, and I'll try not to make it too overtly political because it isn't really meant that way, although I understand when I say it probably will seem that way, but it's not genuinely, it's meant from a good place. It was just about the messaging of this, because when we had the press release about this before, it was sort of a, photos of council saying we have given holiday vouchers. And I understand that we want to have good news stories and perhaps we want to claim ownership a little bit, but I think that messaging can make it seem almost like councils are paying for these vouchers and we're claiming a little bit of credit. And it's actually all Cambridgeshire taxpayers that are paying for this. So obviously, as we know, people have had their council tax bills through their door recently. As we all know, and I won't kind of rehash that debate, but council tax increased quite a lot in Cambridgeshire, and quite a few people have been in touch with me and said it's increased quite a lot and their bills have increased. And obviously that's now money that they can't spend on their children's meals. And I get that's kind of a political decision, and and I'm not criticising that because that's completely everyone's right to make. You make, and you set out your stall. But I just wanted it noted really that it isn't us as councillors doing this kind of thing, it's all Cambridgeshire residents doing this.
Agreed. It's the choices of the council to spend their budget, and I don't think we put on all of our press releases that it's funded from council tax and or government grant and that kind of thing. But I do understand what you're saying. Councillor Slatter, please.
Yes, just a quick one to make sure that people can get the best value out of these, and not everybody is in the same has the same access to supermarkets or whatever. I ought to know this, but are the vouchers given out at the beginning of a holiday for the whole holiday? And I can see there's pros and cons of that in terms of getting economies of scale or running out at the end of the holiday. I just would like to know what officers have decided in the way of making them available to people so they can benefit best.
So we are, and it's in the report, we're aware of obviously that Easter and Christmas are the longer holiday periods, and therefore the voucher amount is more over those periods, and obviously the summer period as well. So we've tried to increase the voucher amounts to reflect the period of the holiday. So the half terms are obviously a reduced amount and being shorter than the other holidays.
Mr. Chair, I don't think I made my question clearly. It's a matter of they're given out for a weekly dole out, or is it up to the parent or the household leader to decide when to spend it and whether to spend it in big lump or week by week?
They are given, they are provided with the voucher at the start of whichever holiday it is, and it's for them to access the voucher and spend within that holiday period. If they don't spend it within the time frame, then we, as we said, we reconcile it and return the money back to the pot.
But the voucher can be used for numerous different trips to a supermarket. Once it's downloaded, it is the parents, and that doesn't come back to us. That's theirs to spend as and when. The only exception is the summer holiday, where we do 2 half amounts rather than one big chunk at the start. Any further questions, queries, comments? Councillor Ambrose Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. Some clarification, please. At 3.4, we're being asked to allocate £3 million for year 24-25. At 3.11, a further £9,000 for a 3-year procurement period. Is this the same as which is being on the recommendation, recommendation C, the extension periods to the executive director? Is that the same? Is that the point you're trying to make? That at 3.11, at section C of the recommendation, the extension periods from the 1st of April and extension periods, are those extension periods the 3-year periods you're talking about in 3.11? And that in that comes to £12 million, which you're saying. So that £12 million, does this committee have authority to actually agree that? Has that come from full council, or are we just talking about the £3 million for this year?
So it was in the medium-term financial scheme settlement. Can't remember what the
Yes, I
F is
know
for,
you mean.
whatever that
Yes,
one is.
yeah.
So yeah, it was in that for the next 4 years. Yeah.
But are we okay to agree that for the next 4 years as a committee? Are we not just talking about this year going forward, or are we talking about the full 4 years?
Sorry, I think recommendation C is trying to get to the procurement operation as to which kind of scheme operators to work with. Any budgetary amounts would need to go through full council and have gone through full council for the coming year. This committee can't kind of take money and kind of spend it. We have to be given it first, but it's a sort of 2-step process, if that makes sense.
That is my point. We haven't been, it says here, and extension periods, and the extension periods are, as it says in 3.11, it is made quite clear. It is £12 million. So I just think we need some clarity there, please.
If you look at B, it's utilising the £3 million for the voucher scheme. Sorry, 24-25. Okay. Anyone else, please? No? Okay.
I understand the B, and I quite agree with that, but I need some explanation on the extension period. Is it just for the contract? Well, the contract is for £12 million, up to £12 million. So this is what we're agreeing here, that the officers can go away, with your help, to agree this £12 million spend. Should this be an officer? Is the answer?
Yeah, so the budget has already been, the money has already been allocated by full council for all 4 years. So that matches then the periods outlined in C, if that makes sense. So I think so that
I'm questioning whether it is for all 4 years. Has it been definitely allocated for all 4 years? Got lots of nods. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are being asked to A, agree the scope and operation of the Cambridgeshire Holiday Voucher Scheme. B, agree to utilise up to £3 million earmarked for this purpose by full council in order to fund the Cambridgeshire Voucher Holiday Scheme during 2024-25, subject to any government announcement available on national funding. And C, to delegate responsibility for awarding and executing a contract for the provision of holiday vouchers starting from the 1st of April 2024 and extension periods to the Executive Director of Children's Education and Families in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Children and Young People's Committee. All of those in favour, please. Thank you. Any abstentions? Sorry. Oh, sorry. All of those in favour, please. Sorry, Rashonda. Those against? And any abstentions, please? Thank you. Rashonda, if you could confirm.
Thank you, Chair. There were 13 votes in favour, 2 abstentions. The motion is carried by a majority.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Helen. So item 6. Item 6 is education contracts, and this will be introduced today by Shelley Kingston, who is our strategic passenger transport manager, and Ian Trafford, who's our education, capital and place planning manager. And Alan Fitz, I think, is going to join as well to answer any technical questions that committee may have this afternoon. When you're ready, if you'd like to introduce the report.
Sorry, I hadn't got much to say by way of introduction. Alan will introduce the section on the on early years, and Shelley will do likewise on the school transport.
Thank you. I'm Alan Fitz. I'm an area education officer with responsibility for planning early years and school places. As council is aware, the council has statutory duty in relation to providing sufficient early years and childcare places. And although the council is not expected to deliver the places, childcare themselves, we are expected to work with the market to help ensure there's enough places available. As part of this, some council-owned property is let to external providers to deliver childcare. This is mostly schools, but there are some other buildings used as well. In October 2022, a paper was brought to the committee to seek approval to establish the PDPS, pseudo-dynamic purchasing system. And this is basically a register of council-owned, council-approved providers, to which we will advertise any new settings and any new opportunities that come about. It provides a sort of more streamlined process and allows us to act more quickly. For example, when we get a setting closes, so we can get a new provider on site quicker. We have 25 early years providers already on the PDPS, and in the last year awarded contracts to 7 settings, which are set out in report. And the third round for new providers to join the PDPS has just closed, and we have another 11 prospective early years providers who've applied to join. So at the 2022 committee meeting, it was agreed, I think most because the value of the contracts is well over 500,000, that we would return to the committee each year with the opportunities to be advertised for the following year, and these are set out in table 1 of the report. And we last came back to the committee in March 2023. So the idea is to keep members informed as plans progress, and then any future plans for new opportunities to let members know of these each year. So, Shelley.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Shelley Kingston. I'm the Strategic Passenger Transport Manager. The Council has statutory duties, as you're aware, in relation to home to school transport. This includes ensuring there is sufficient transport to enable children and young people to travel to school and college. Our transport commitment is a combination of mainstream and SEND. And although there are less children and young people who travel through the SEND criteria, the cost is proportionately higher due to specific needs and placements. Every day we transport 11,900 statutory school-age children to and from school. In September 24, we are retendering for 4,000 children of statutory school age. This equates to approximately 550 contracts, 550 routes. Annually, we undertake a procurement round of approximately 1/3 of all our school transport routes. And as a committee, we're being asked, as a committee, I'm asking for approval for the retendering of the routes for September 2024. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything to add in? Are you happy with? Brilliant. Comments and questions. I've got Councillor Hoy first, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very useful paper and really detailed. I was surprised to see so many figures in it, to be honest. But just one thing I didn't notice, and this could have been me missing it, so apologies if it's in there and I have missed it, but I didn't see, obviously we know about the over 30 children in from Wisbech going to Littleport next year, and we have I don't see any cost of that in the report. So do we know what that cost is likely to be?
You mean cost for the transport to that school? Okay. From a transport perspective, until those children actually apply, then we don't know what those costs, how to measure those costs to give you a figure actually now. But what we do at the moment is that we prep for the spec of those children that we're anticipating. But I could provide some of those costs separately outside of this meeting.
I was to say, it's not about them applying. They were forced to attend there because there was no space in local schools. So it's not, they've been told that's where they're going to school. So it's not like they chose to apply. So we should have really been doing that work, because otherwise how are we going to know any transport costs?
We spec for the transport costs, but until they actually apply, because it may be in some circumstances those families may be successful in appeal, those families may decide to go elsewhere, and until they actually apply, then we won't know the exact cost. But we know the numbers that will be going to those schools that won't be able to go to Wisbech. So therefore we do anticipate that cost, but we don't know the exact amount until they actually apply.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions from me, if I may. Firstly, to do with Northstowe, if I look at the page 111, I believe is the appendices, is regarding Northstowe Secondary Phase 2, which is the completion has slipped slightly to January 2025 from December 2024. I just wondered what specifically has slipped to that date, because I know we've gone through phases, and I'm trying to understand if it's the nursery that's going to be affected in any way, or the school. I've got that 3 questions. Sorry, I don't know. Yeah. So obviously the other one is I'm concerned because of we don't have enough full daycare providers on our system. And what happens if we don't have anyone come forward for the Northstowe nursery, because that is what has been recommended. Do we have a plan B? And my third question is about Oakington, who we assigned an early years provider last September. I believe they're doing really well, but I understand that the numbers are quite low. And I wondered what we do to help them, or how do we assist them to acquire more numbers, or, to keep afloat, I think is the question. Thank you.
I'll take the first one on Northstowe. The date you refer to is the contract completion date, but that doesn't mirror what's available from September 2024. So we did get delayed in planning. We had hoped to be complete by September, but that wasn't achievable. So we've gone for something called sectional completion. So the accommodation required for reception and nursery children who are entering the primary school in September will be available as planned. And then the remainder of the build will build out until the end of the calendar year, hence the the contractual completion date of 2025. As regards number of daycare providers, Alan may want to come in further on that. I know since we've been running the PS, obviously the number of providers that have come onto that network has increased. I think the report says we're up to 25 and we're constantly advertising for additional providers to come in. I'm not sure of the balance between early years providers and full daycare on that. So we're in a better position from running the PDPS than we were previously, but you'd always like more providers and more competition in there. So hopefully that does grow over time. In the Northstowe area specifically, I don't know how that will sort of translate into general interest in the Northstowe facility, but as I say, there are more people on that purchasing network with an opportunity to bid for that opportunity. And in terms of Oakington, I don't know a lot of detail on that, but if settings are struggling for numbers, obviously there's opportunities in the pipeline with the extension of the early years offer. But I know colleagues in the early years team will work with settings on how they vary their offer. If they're not actually meeting parents' needs locally, they can work with them on that. They can also work with them on how they market and present themselves as well. So I'm not aware of the detail, but I do know people who probably will be working with a setting where they think it's vulnerable, but because of the general numbers that they're seeing coming through their door.
Just to add to the Oakington, I think we now are aware that the setting that might actually close. So we will have to decide as officers. We've got a building, and I think which is it's expected to be used for early years. So we're going to have to sit down and work out what we're going to do, whether we will tender it again. Whether we wait until the extended entitlements in place, which may boost numbers, because I think they had very low numbers, so that's it just hasn't proved to be viable. So I think we're going to have to sit down and decide what's the best way. But that has only literally just come in. Yep.
Thank you. That's really unfortunate to hear, actually. I know they were struggling locally, but I believe the school has recently had an Ofsted. It's become good, which is really helpful, I think, because I think maybe parents' choice of not choosing a local school for that reason. So I wonder if that, but just to confirm that you are looking at are we looking at closing that site then?
That will be an option, I guess, we'd have to consider, given we've had two providers who haven't made it work, early years providers, in the last 4 or 5 years. So yeah, we're going to have a think about what to do.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, please.
Thank you. Hello, that's better. Yes, good. Yes, your lips didn't move, Sam. Yeah, I've got 3 questions. And the first one is on page 51, where I suppose it's in my declaration of interest anyway, but I am a governor of Borough Green Primary and Boddisham Village College, which are both on the list, but I'm not asking questions about them at all. On page 51, we're looking at this is on the transport side. We're looking at the procurement of transport for eligible students. How are we? I understand we've got a legal responsibility for post-16 transport in respect of education. How are we discharging our responsibility on that would be my first point. The second point, and it's touching slightly on what Councillor Hoy was just saying, actually, we talk about the extra transport costs, and we look at Wisbech, for example, and also I believe children are having to go from Camborne to St Ives for secondary education and Wisbech to Littleport, we just mentioned. Was that factored into the budget when it was set, which was laid before us about 3 weeks ago? And then finally, and this is on the later paper, on the finance paper on page 92, we're talking about a 5% higher retention rate from primary to secondary, which means we're getting more children into the system. So, and this may be a question you can't answer, it may be a political question. What are we doing to actually create more school places closer to where people live rather than having them transported around the county? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take the first question and then pass to my colleague. Okay, post 16. I gave you figures earlier of around 11,900. That was a statutory school age. It's at an additional approximate 600 children, young people that are post 16 that we transport on a daily basis. When a young person reaches the end of statutory school age, they will make a new application if they're post 16, and that application would be considered under eligibility, and then individually those applications are looked at in accordance as to whether they are eligible for transport or not. We are largely providing transport for post 16 SEND, and exceptional circumstances would apply to post 16 mainstream in very exceptional cases. Hope that answers your question. I'm going to pass over to Ian.
Sorry, if I can come back on that. It does, sorry, Chair. It does answer the question, but it poses another one. So basically, we're providing, which is what I thought was the answer, we're providing transport, sorry, for SEND EHCP children, which, yes, we need to be doing that. But for mainstream children, we're not providing anything. So they're under their own steam, literally, to get to take A levels. And this is, I was at Long Road College with the mayor last Tuesday evening, talking to students and parents about their difficulties getting into colleges. And have we got a statutory duty to do it or not, is really my question.
I know the colleges do run a bursary scheme, and there are subsidies for transport costs through that. It's not a statutory obligation. So as Shelley said, it's not something that we statutory and can provide to all students, but there is a means tested bursary scheme that's used by the colleges.
If I can come back, Chair, I hear what you're saying. It's not what I need to go back and read further into that, because it's not my understanding of it, but thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton next, I think. No? Oh, sorry.
Bill Hunsford, thank you.
So there were two other questions first. I'll deal with the last one, the third one first, because it's an area I'm more familiar with. You mentioned about the higher retention rate on the transition from primary to secondary, and that is something we're seeing, I think, as fewer parents may be choosing not to take the private sector route. When we plan school places, we sort of have two forecasts that we use. There's the trend-based forecast for schools, which will take account of things like movement of pupils between different schools and catchment areas, as well as the retention rate. But more importantly, when we plan school places, either in existing communities or new communities, we plan them on the catchment forecast. And the catchment forecast is sort of, it includes all children living within an area. And we sustain that position during negotiations with developers and district councils, just to err on the safe side, because forecasts are only forecasts. So we're mitigating our risk around any fluctuation in forecasts as well. So we actually plan on the basis of all pupils. So in terms of planning our places, the retention rate while it affects the number attending a school, shouldn't affect our places planning function and how we approach that. As regards the budget, yeah, if you don't mind, Martin.
I'll come forward and ask the question about the budget. Yeah, so in terms of the budget, yeah, so when we set the budget originally, we do build in the element of demand based on the assumed forecast for overall secondary numbers going forward into the next financial year. Obviously, what we don't know, as Shelley alluded to earlier, is exactly where all those pupils are going to be and therefore what routes are going to be required. So we build an element in, but until we've actually got the cost of those total routes, we don't obviously know what that will actually cost for the entire year coming up.
Thank you for that, Martin. I understand that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so rather like Councillor Sharp, I should declare that at one of the schools on the list, the Great Wilburn Primary School, I'm a governor there, but it is in my declarations. I have two questions on the two different parts of the paper. On the first part of the paper, in terms of early years provision, the providers, some of the providers are maintained schools and some of the providers are other, I think, I'm correct. I'm not familiar with them. Is there a material difference in the approach according to who or what the providers are? That's one question on the first part of the paper. On the second part of the paper, if you could just give some idea of why the amount set aside is so different in different places, and whether that's to do with SEND or just some idea of what makes the huge difference in sums of money.
To answer the first one, no, there's no difference. So it's the same process, whether it's a setting in a school or another location, or it's a school applying to run a setting. So, for example, Sutton was one of the ones we awarded a contract to last year. Was a school taking over as a preschool.
Could you just pull the microphone to you so you're
Sorry.
speaking into the microphone?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so Sutton was a school where the school applied to run the setting, but we have on other school sites, it might be some another provider would come in. So it's exactly the same process.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that, this is essentially a public sector procurement, and the rules governing a public sector procurement are pretty onerous, and you're actually required to have a set of evaluation criteria that are consistent, that you evaluate all providers against, and woe betide you if you depart from that.
On your third point, I think, or your second rather, was the various numbers. Yes, it is confusing. But just to try and offer some clarity, that we're talking about routes and we're talking about contracts, but we're also talking about annual and we're talking about 5-year periods too. So I can see where, if you're quickly reading through, that it can appear challenging.
That's a really good explanation. It might be helpful in future to have some footnotes on tables like that.
I agree. I certainly take that on board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Atkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the first part of the paper, the early years provision, I couldn't see anywhere what the standard length of contract is that we're now calling off the purchasing system for. Obviously, the recommendation says contract starting in the next 12 months, but could you just confirm, is there a standard length of contract, or is it going to be different for different settings?
Yes, there is a standard length, which is 5 years. And we usually put in for another 5 years, depending on performance, meeting the contract after that. So that's a standard. I think that's what we do in virtually all cases.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I've been told it can vary from case to case occasion.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack, please.
Thank you. Shelley Allen, it's a very complicated area you work in, very legislation driven. So thank you for being very clear in your answers today. I think you three have done very well. Hopefully I'm going to allow you to continue that with my 2 points. 11,900, it's a big number. But I'd be really intrigued, as I'm sure many members of the public and other members would be, on what is that as a percentage of the pupils that we look after. Because I don't know. So, I don't know whether we're talking about 1% or 20%. I could do with that qualification. The second question's more on, it is entirely on the early years provision. Ian will remember an issue that arose at a early years centre where I was interested to see that we work and we try and discount to try and get suppliers in. But often in locations, there are already suppliers. Can I be reassured by officers that we do absolutely everything possible to make sure that we don't give an advantage to one entrepreneurial offer of early years over an existing one? So, for instance, if we're discounting premises and IMA have got their own premises and they're paying full rates for them, that's a very big advantage for an early years supplier who are working in areas of very small margins on their business operations.
Yes, you can have my assurance on that, and I am familiar, obviously, with the case you're referring to and the audit report which followed that. I would say, as officers, we've come a long way since then. We recognise that at that point the relevant processes and procedures weren't in place, and you learn from the past. What we've got now is more robust, and as I said, it's a public sector procurement route. And the opportunity to show anyone favours or depart from the agreed process are virtually non-existent.
Your first point in terms of the percentage of the 11,900 that are looked after children, I think, or children in care is what you was asking. I don't have that number to hand. I would need to go away and have a look at that. That is the number of children and young people, the 11,900, but I can go away and have a look at what the percentage is, but probably easier to determine the number of routes too.
Thank you. Hopefully I'm not the only one that would quite appreciate that information, because it just gives me a bit of scale and a bit of understanding. Just if I can have a follow-up question to that, Chair, thank you through you. One of the questions I was going to ask is, you said a couple of times provision of transportation for statutory school age. I thought statutory school age was now 18.
I think it's not necessarily in sort of full-time education or in school or college as we know it. It's either in education, training, or some form of employment apprenticeship type course. So yes, it is probably 18. I think it was called raising the participation age rather than the education age, but it's not necessarily full-time college or full-time sixth form place.
So if I've got ward members, and I'm sure other members here have got ward members that will be asking to, is there any financial support for 16 to 17-year-olds to attain further education, travel support? Then the answer, as the chair said, was either through contact the school themselves for particular bursaries, or there is a process by which they can apply. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get it.
I can add to what the chair said earlier, that we also offer limited number of spare seats on certain vehicles for post-16 where available. That does depend on the type of vehicle, and that obviously depends on availability. That doesn't meet the demand, but it does often in some cases help many families out.
One last bit on the back of that. I myself live in a very rural community, but there are many rural communities in our wonderful county who haven't got a single bus or public transport access. So I know parents in my village take them to the next village to get a bus or a train in to come to Hills Road or Long Road, or even to go to West Suffolk, etc., etc. So what I'm saying is how do those people apply for it? It's direct through yourselves, is it? directly through Cambridgeshire County Council. Not saying they will get a positive answer, but there could be a chance that they could be entitled to some support.
In some cases, there may be exceptions where people are entitled to support. We receive many applications along those lines. The vast majority probably are declined because they don't meet a criteria. That criteria could be low income in some circumstances, or extreme situations where we may need to provide some support. But in addition, the majority of people would be applying through their schools on bursaries.
Okay, this is not an urgent thing, but I think it might be very useful. And apologies for all the questions because I'm new to this committee. But could you either point us to where that criteria is, so it's easy for members to share with their ward members, or even share it with us ourselves so that we're armed with it? I think that would be very useful. Thank you.
I think it would be useful to have a briefing note on the bursary system and the transport system 16 to 18. And I know that Fran Cox couldn't be with us today, and I'm sure she's got far more information than I have in my head on this, but I will ensure, if we can add it to the action log, that we have a briefing on that. Thank you. Martin.
I just want to clarify something to make sure that we get the right information to you, Councillor. The number of children in care was mentioned earlier as 11,000, but I think I must have misunderstood because we've got 600 children in care.
No, definitely. It's 11,900 statutory school-age children that we transport per day.
Thank you very much. That makes it much better. And Councillor, you wanted to know what the entire cohort of children was in statutory school age, is that right?
Well, I did, but what I was trying to get a comparison, get a hold on what 11,900 means. Obviously, it means an awful lot to 11,900 pupils, but what is that as a percentage of all the children that don't need help to get to school?
Yeah, so of all the children that attend school, we help 11,900, and what proportion of that is that of the total amount that we support? Yeah, okay, we can get that for you.
Thank you. Councillor Ambrose Smith, please.
Hello, thank you. I'm looking at significant implications, and that's on page 44. At 7.3, you actually mentioned on risk implications, there are no risks, there are no significant risks. But if you look at what you've done here on 7.1, you say there is a risk. There's a risk in the fact that nationwide shortage of drivers, rising fuel costs, and other things. And then to follow on from that, you say that we're going forward a transformation programme as looking at work streams on savings and improved practices growing across transport. This also includes utilising the combined authority, improving driver shortages and introducing restricted licences support to districts. Can you tell me what support you are actually getting from these improved practices? In fact, have they started as yet?
I'd be delighted to. With the combined authority, we're looking at 2 routes where they will be, we're looking for implementation from September 24. Of those 2 routes, that's Sawston and sorry, it slipped my mind for a moment, but I'll come back to that. But there are 2 routes with the combined authority. With restricted licenses, this is a new area for us within transport that we're exploring at the moment. We're talking to other colleagues within the county council, but also we'll be talking to districts too. We know from other local authorities that there's a real drive to implement widening the breadth of people meeting the demands for home to school transport. And restricted licenses is obviously looking at single set routes and not private hire. So it's a subject area that we are really optimistic about. So both of those things are at different stages. As I say, that with the work with the combined authority, the CPCA, that work is expected to commence from September 24.
Thank you very much. Chairman, just a follow up, please. Thank you for that. Regarding the 2 routes, that's small fry, is it not, compared to all the routes that you do? and exploring, you used the word exploring a number of times on how you're going forward. Shouldn't this then be added to the risk register or the risk in 3.7.3? Should there not still be a risk?
Yes, I would agree there. Looking at how the report's been drafted in 7.1, there's clearly a risk. And what we're describing in 7.1 are some of the mitigations which need to be developed further, as presumably some of the work with the CPCA will revolve around the increase in the sort of number of service routes, etc. So it's an ongoing sort of process of mitigation rather than this is what we're doing it now and here it will stop. But certainly the way it's described in the report, I would agree, it is a risk. We're describing risk and then we're describing mitigation. So yes.
I'll ask you, Chair, really. Would it be possible to see the progress on those items which we're working with, the transformation, the improved practices and the help from CPCA? Could we have a paper on that at some stage when we're further down the line?
We can certainly have an update on it. I don't know if it would be a full paper, but if you're happy with an update, we can take that forward. Councillor Daunton, please.
I'm really pleased to hear what you've just been saying about the routes and the positive aspect of that. And I'm sure that I know in my own division, a very rural division in part, with virtually no bus service, well, no bus service in part, but school buses running through it. And I think this is I hope, a good way forward, and look forward to receiving more information and possibly the extension as well. I'll be lining up for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bulat, please. Thank you, Chair. I had a question around the process as well for the early years, because I had some feedback from one of the governors in one of the preschools that are listed under the contracts awarded, and they said that it was quite, a lengthy and time-consuming and quite a challenging process. So I was wondering, in general, like how do officers take this feedback from the settings, from the providers into account, and when we actually review those processes to make it more, I guess, user-friendly, perhaps. That's the feedback I personally receive. I'm sure people have different experiences, but I guess the broad question is, how do we take into account this feedback, and what kind of feedback do we collect on how settings experience the process of the system?
Yeah, I'm tempted to say, believe it or not, the process we've got now with the PDPS is significantly more streamlined than if you went out to open tender. Now, it may not feel like that to providers, and I'd understand that. It's still quite onerous, because within the PDPS, obviously, to get on there in the first place, you've got to pass a lot of the quality thresholds, quality questions. So when we do a procurement, that's taken as a given. So believe it or not, it's a lot more streamlined than it used to be, and it would be if we were doing open procurements. Whether there's the scope within the current process to make that more streamlined, whether there are any questions that the providers felt weren't relevant, I don't know. I don't know what we do as sort of as a post wash up to any individual procurement round, but we could certainly go down the route of asking some providers, asking officers involved in the evaluation process, and see if there are any lessons learned, and could we become a bit slicker, although I would emphasize PDPS is probably slicker than what we had before.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, please.
I'm really sorry. I've been thinking about this while we've been discussing. With regard to travel for children to school, most of the queries that I've had is that paid children can't get on the buses, even though there's spaces on the buses. Is that something we're also looking at? Does that make sense?
I didn't quite catch it all. Would you mind just repeating it for me?
Sorry, so when we have buses going to schools, the people that require them, for the pupils that require them, we usually have spaces, or we sometimes have spaces, but we can't sell those spaces. Are we looking at being able to sell those spaces at all? Does that make sense now? Sorry, it just...
I believe this relates to the vehicle requirements and the use of seat belts, etc. And this is to do with the certain age of vehicles. And it was a decision that was made some time ago by County Council that we wouldn't be utilising selling spare seats on those particular types of vehicles. So I can make reference back to that, but I'd need to go away and have a look at that. I don't recall the date of that off the top of my head. But that is the reason why, and it's to do with the legislation and the requirements on those vehicles.
Just the reason why I asked that, because I've had quite a lot of queries from Oakington going to IVC, because they say the route is quite a long route. So it'd be really good to know that, because I think there's lots of paying parents want to do that, so they don't actually take their kids to school every day or try to get them to cycle. So I don't know if that would be an income. I don't really know, but I just feel like we're missing out on an opportunity, but totally understand this legislation as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? In which case, deep breath. We're being asked in relation to early years provision to delegate responsibility for awarding and executing contracts for the provision of early years and childcare starting April 2024 to April 2025, and extension periods to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families in consultation with the Chair and the Vice Chair of the Children and Young People's Committee. These are listed below. Early years provision at Milton Church of England Primary School, early years provision at Brightfields Children's Centre in Farset, early years provision at Swordtree Infant School, early years and wraparound provision adjacent to Melbourne Primary School, early years provision at Caldecott Primary School, wraparound provision at the former Children's Centre in Somersham Education. And in relation to the transport contracts, we're being asked to delegate responsibility for awarding and executing contract for the provision of special, mainstream and children's social care transport contracts for the implementation in 2024 to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Children and Young People's Committee. All of those in favour, please raise your hands now. It's in. And I think that's unanimous. Thank you. Before we go, this is Ian's final meeting with us. He's retiring and off to sunnier climes. As Councillor Goldsack alluded to earlier, Ian has been with us a while and remembers back to an awful lot of different things that he's done over the years. And we'd like to put on record our thanks for all of the work that you've done for the children of Cambridgeshire.
Thank you very much. That is appreciated. I almost thought I'd got away with it, though.
Item 7. Item 7 is the recommissioning of the Healthy Child programme.
Advocacy.
We've just done item 6.
I don't remember it referring to advocacy, but anyway, there you go.
Item 7 is the recommissioning of the Healthy Child programme, and this report is introduced by Raj Lakshman, the consultant in public health. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly introduce the report and then give time for questions. So the Healthy Child programme is recommissioned currently across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough through a single Section 75 agreement, and these come to an end on the 31st of March 2025. What we are asking for is a recommendation to commission an integrated service across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough in order to maintain the stability of the service and to allow improvements to be consolidated. And there are a number of other reasons as well, which I go through in detail in the paper. And once we've once we've gone through this, we'll bring further papers about what will be included in the approach to commissioning. This fits with the Council's ambition 7 mainly, but a lot of the other ambitions as well. So the Healthy Child programme is basically health visiting and school nursing. It's a national public health programme, one of the biggest areas of public health spend, with an overarching ambition of
achieving good outcomes for all children from pregnancy through 19 years of age and reducing inequalities. As I said, there's a single Section 75 and the contract values are over 9 million in Cambridgeshire and just over 4 million in Peterborough. We have a number of shared posts which are listed in 2.6. The total value is about almost 130,000. But it's not just the financial value of these shared posts and some of the specialist posts that are important, but a lot of other benefits of having an integrated service. There's a national commissioning guidance on what needs to be included. There's a lot of mandated functions. We always report to committee on the performance across some of the mandated contacts. But as evidence in the appendix, a lot of time is spent on safeguarding and other statutory functions as well. Section 4 goes into the performance, and it just to highlight that we have had recruitment and retention issues. It's a workforce that's difficult to recruit to because of the type of work going into family homes of all children born in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. There are 5 contacts that happen. And so the graph just shows that we've struggled to get the visits done within timescales, but they do happen. So more than 90% of children are seen at those mandated contacts, slightly outside timescale, but it shows an improving picture, which is similar in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, of getting them seen within timescale. So that's the some of the mandated checks, but there's also a web link. There's a single point of contact. So it's a universal service. Anybody can call or text into the service, and there's numbers that come in. There's also a specialist family nurse partnership for teenage parents, and there is a single vision screening program as well. In terms of the 5 to 19, we've just launched some getting ready for change questionnaires for key stages. And I think it's the demand and capacity tool has been used to look at where the workforce is spending their time, and that's in the appendix. So there is a joint leadership and management structure. So the reasons for asking it to be integrated is there is a joint leadership and management structure supported by 3 locality teams. So we get separate performance monitoring, separate finance monitoring across the localities, but it helps to have a single management structure in terms of learning across the patch and also learning from the rest of the East of England. Cambridgeshire Community Services is a provider across the East of England for a number of healthy child programs. Some of the specialist elements like support for teenage parents, vision screening are all delivered by single teams which work across, and there are efficiency savings. The other reasons are also because we have some of the joint structures. It links very much with the NHS structures. So the North Partnership includes Peterborough, the Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy, the Infant Feeding Strategy. We've just set up the School-Aged Health Improvement Partnership. Some of these are county-wide, and so it helps to have a joint structure. I've put in details about the benefits for Cambridgeshire that inspire that it'll we get learning from other parts of the East of England. There are no financial risks because we will have 2 separate arrangements, contracts, whatever it is, with the 2 local authorities will have separate contracts with the provider that's chosen, and also will have separate finance performance monitoring as we've always done in the past. I think I'll stop and take questions.
Thank you. Comments and questions. I've got Councillor Slatter first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering whether we should be adding dental checks into this somewhere. Many of us, like me, are on the Adults and Health, and we're well aware that dental health is very important, and we are very worried about it, actually. And just as you have screening for vision, it would seem to me there is a place in here to at least show where we've got the partnerships and who with. Even though it is with the ICB, obviously you're going to be doing the same sort of things. I would have liked to see that mentioned here. The other one is, of course, healthy weight. But again, perhaps you could tell me how you view that. I know you haven't forgot their teeth.
So at each of the contacts, there are different things that the health visitors have to discuss with them. So at the 1-year check, they will ask about whether they've registered the child with the dentist. Prior to that, they will give them advice about the tooth, looking after their baby's teeth. So there's all those things about tooth-friendly diet, supervised toothbrushing, fluoride in toothpaste, and so they give the oral health promotion messages at every contact. At 1 year and the 2.5-year checks, they will again ask about oral health and give those health promotion messages. So at each contact, there's a list of things they will check on: immunizations, healthy weight. We get the data on healthy weight at 1 year, 2.5 years. We've just started introducing solids workshops as well. So there's a lot more in there that happens. There is a separate oral health promotion contract that the ICB holds with Cambridgeshire Community Services dental team as well, which is about supervised toothbrushing in early year settings and in schools, feeder schools. That is a contract that the ICB holds. Obviously, dental provision is part of the ICB's remit, but the oral health promotion is done by health visitors at their contacts.
I ask if there's any reason why that's not actually mentioned. Is that something perhaps we could consider in future, rather than make it clear? Because we need to be linking up across the committees and with the ICB, just to be shown that we haven't forgotten bits of their bodies.
Sure. And I think the service specification which we draw up, it links all the outcomes that they need to work towards. So we have the list of public health outcomes, which includes oral health, and we have the dental survey at age 5, which we know what's happening with oral health before they even are at the stage that they're needing work done. Thank you.
Councillor Daunton, please.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for the report and for the presentation. I've no problems at all with the recommendations in the paper, but at 5.2.3, you very openly said that there are problems, challenges operationally with the IT systems in particular. And from what I take from that is that these challenges have been around for a while and not being dealt with. And so how moving forward, as you say here, what are the plans for dealing with them moving forward once the new structure or the prolongation of the structure is in place?
So the IT now, both trusts are using System 1. That was one of the issues when we first started. This is going on since 2019. So they have been trying to harmonize. So the clinical systems are now harmonized. So they're using the same protocols and the same what to discuss at each checks, what to look for, maternal mood reviews, healthy weight, as Councillor said. So some of those clinical systems have been harmonized, but there's still more things that we can do to make it more streamlined and harmonized, is what I was trying to say in that point.
And there is, just to be reassured, there is active work going on to do that. And that's actually part of this joint venture moving forward. And that's what you want to happen. So just to be reassured on that.
Yes, very much so. They've even gotten some external consultants to do a review and look at how to make it work better.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just to clarify, my understanding in 5.2.3 was that you were referencing that the 2 NHS trusts are running very different systems rather than the 2 councils. Have I got that?
Yes,
that's the point you were
that is
trying
the
to get.
point, yes.
Thank
That
you.
is the point. It's the 2 NHS trusts, CCS and CPFT, who are delivering the service.
Thank you.
But the IT system is now the same. They've both got system one and they've harmonized that. And as you can see, the website is also now, there's just one website, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough website. But these were lots of the teething issues we've been working through over the last few years.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Taylor next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I did have two questions, but Councillor Dawton took that one, so thank you very much. So that has been explained. So I'm looking at 2.6. Additional costs would be incurred if the services were delivered separately, either by age category or geography. So although we're looking at Cambridge, for Cambridgeshire, this means approximately 129k budget pressure. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't seem huge, but when you look at it and you have put equivalent to 3 frontline practitioners, and within the appendices and the summary table below, we see those frontline staffing, whole-time health visitors and staff nurse and assistant practitioner. So when you look at it in the context of what this provides, the facility, it's something that has a really positive impact. So I'm really happy to see that, and I absolutely support this integrated system for a healthy child.
Thank you so much.
Councillor Bradnam, please.
You can be pleased to know that both of my questions have been asked by my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hay, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question. In the report under 4.3.1 says that since the current Section 75 agreement has been in place, the providers have achieved the following. And if you look at bullet point 5, which is at the top of page 65, it mentions that the Family Nurse Partnership supported 142 vulnerable teenage parents in the last year. Referrals of teenage parents to FNP is currently higher than places available. I'm finding that difficult to tie in with what we're being told in 5.2.1, where it starts off by saying December 2008, it was agreed to bring together Healthy Child Programme delivery across Cambridge and Peterborough into a single integrated programme. Since this arrangement has been in place, the following improvements and successes have been achieved. And in the second bullet point, it goes changing the support for teenage parents through retaining the Family Nurse Partnership for those young parents who are most vulnerable under a single supervisor, but enhancing access for all teenage parents to extend beyond the universal mandated offer. I find that difficult to marry those two because one's on the negative side, yet we're being saying that there has been successes and improvements, but obviously not enough if we still haven't got enough places available.
So thank you, and apologies, that's a bit confusing. So we commission 100 FNP places. The Family Nurse Partnership is a licensed program, so we have to run it as per the national unit specifications, and it's a very intensive program. They have to have a lot of visits. So we can only fund about 100 spaces on the Family Nurse Partnership, but we use that learning that the family nurses, because we have the national unit support and we have a licensed Family Nurse Partnership here, we can use that knowledge and the resources and all the other materials that come with it to have an enhanced young parent pathway, which means that those who don't get onto the FNP very intensive licensed program can have this enhanced young parent pathway, which is more than what the universal mandated offers are. They get more antenatal visits, not as intensive as FNP and not at the fidelity of the licensed program, but we can support more young parents through the enhanced young parent pathway. So those who, if there isn't the space on the FNP, they can have the enhanced young parent pathway.
Right, I understand that. So basically what you're saying is we're only allowed a certain number of spaces on this programme, and that is laid down by government or by the National Health?
That's laid down by how many each FNP nurse is allowed to supervise. They can't have a higher caseload than
a certain number of teenage parents, and we can only afford to have I think if we look at the workforce, there's 1 supervisor and 3 family nurses who are at that level. They're expensive band 7 family nurses, and they're only allowed a certain caseload.
So is that a consistent thing where there's not enough places? Because what I would be saying then is we should be lobbying to have more family nurse practitioners. My other point would be, how did we decide which teenage parents gets to see a family nurse practitioner and which one doesn't? Is there a hierarchy of problems?
Yes, there is, and we have some criteria. So there is a way by which we can risk assess, so care leavers, and if there is domestic violence, the trio of vulnerabilities, there's domestic abuse or mental health issues, learning disabilities. There's a list of things that, and there is antenatally, they have to be recruited quite early in pregnancy. Antenatally, there'll be a panel who discuss and take the most vulnerable on the program, and the rest, if there's a space available, they can move on.
I'm sorry to
But yeah,
labour.
care leavers and learning disability, mental health issues, substance misuse, domestic violence, those are the ones.
Sorry to labour this, but I really want to get my head around this. If we are consistently finding there is not enough places, have we done any lobbying to say, look, we need more places from family nurse practitioners? Is there any plans to take on more family nurse practitioners?
So we could, if we wanted, decide that we want to put more money into family nurse partnership and put more, we could employ more of them. But I think what we find is that a lot of local authorities have decommissioned the whole family nurse partnership. They don't even have the licensed program. We've kept it going because it's one of the well-evidenced programs. I think a lot of local authorities have actually decommissioned FNP because they just can't afford to have them. We get a lot of learning, and I think we get a lot of benefit from the national unit by keeping it going, even if we have a small number who we can support, but we can extend that learning to the other parents. So yes, I think it is up to each local authority to decide how they want to use their resource. And obviously, if we put more into FNP, we'll have to take it out from somewhere else.
Thank you for that. Chair, I would like to just say to you, if you could have a word with officers, because I'm not interested about other authorities if they've done away with this. If we are finding it is helpful, then we should be looking at if there's any way we can increase the number of these practitioners, because it's unfair that some people get the chance to see a family nurse practitioner and others don't.
Just want to reassure you, I've heard and understood your questions, and I'll pick that up with my counterpart.
Councillor Bradnam, did you want to come back on this point or something else?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I absolutely support what Councillor Hay is saying, but I also wanted to clarify my understanding of what you're telling us, which is, as I understand it, what you've said is the family nurse partnership is a very expensive, very well evidenced, very effective, licensed programme. But because it's licensed and we've got people on it, admittedly, not as many as we would like, that learning can be shared with other people who can, because we have the national unit, we can then use that knowledge and resource to enhance the delivery that we give to young parent pathway. So it sounds like, yes, absolutely, I agree. It would be great if we had enough, but given that it's expensive, sharing the learning through the enhanced young parent pathway is an effective way of sharing that learning. Is that what I'm understanding you to say?
Exactly correct, yes.
And sorry, Raj, can I just check? I think when we discussed this previously, it's not as simple as just employing one more person. We'd have to employ a whole team, wouldn't it? So you have to employ the whole team and then the person to supervise the team as well. So financially, it's not as simple as a single additional salary. It's a whole team, isn't it? Yeah. I've got councillor Goldsack next, please.
Thank you. The question may or may not be for you, Raj, but first of all, I want to compliment you on the report. My question is that we've got a report here that's recommending the continuation of a shared services arrangement with Peterborough. We've very eloquently talked about the benefits of doing that. My question is maybe to Martin, the Executive Director, or yourself, Chair, is how does this sit with the administration's rapid reverse out of the relationship with Peterborough? And yet we're being asked here today to vote for it for all the reasons why it was put in place in the first place.
I think this is a joint commission which gives us benefits of scale rather than a shared service which one would host and then the other would receive. So it's a different type of arrangement. It's just a joint commission. It gives us benefits of scale.
If I can come back on that. So none of the other aspects of the shared arrangement with Peterborough we're together, we're a bigger thing, we can buy for better price and get better deal. Because I believe that they were.
I've luckily only been here since we've been doing the separation, so I can't refer to the analysis that was done about the benefits of joining the services. But all I know is that with reading this paper and conversation with public health colleagues, the benefits of scale that we get from this shared joint commission, we wouldn't be able to achieve if we'd done it individually. Is that correct, Raj? Yeah. So on that basis, it's beneficial. The wider shared services, I couldn't comment on.
And the other is about the links with the wider NHS, because it's part of the pathway to the specialist end of the NHS services. So it's the universal early intervention bit, and it links in with the other NHS pathways. So we need to link in with midwifery during pregnancy, and that fits in with the NVAF footprint, which has Peterborough, Fenland and Huntingdonshire. And so because of the link with the wider NHS and the ICS,
let me be clear, Raj. I totally support this. Absolutely, totally support this. I think this is a really, really good idea. But it just sounded very contra to the ideas that we've been getting at front, maybe the senior strategy resources committees and things like that, about we're reversing out of this as fast as we possibly can. Yeah, here's an absolutely perfect scheme. Thank you for the answer. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Thank you.
I think thank you for those comments, Councillor Goldsack. I think the thing that jumps out to me about this scheme, perhaps, which I think would not be true of most of the other joint arrangements that we've looked at, is that this is very universal in its provision. It's intending, most of the money is being spent providing sort of an identical service to every single child, more or less, and trying to ensure kind of parity of access. Whereas my understanding of a lot of the other joint arrangements they were much more targeted and meant to address kind of specific areas of need. And in those situations, perhaps the differences between Cambridgeshire and Peterborough in terms of their geographies, their demography, become more important. And we might want to make different decisions that reflect the specific needs of Cambridgeshire as opposed to Peterborough. Whereas for a universal scheme like this, it's obviously less, the fact that there are big differences in geography and demography between the two is less important when you're just, you're trying to make sure that every child is seen at this point and this point, and that they receive these 5 key messages and so on and so forth. So that would be my initial response, but happy to talk to you further about.
Well, just on that, it's interesting because I would have thought, and I don't know, this is just gut feel, I would have thought that Cambridgeshire was considerably larger than Peterborough, and yet it's 56-44 if you look at the amount of spend. So that doesn't quite tally. It looks to me as if we're maybe not getting enough bang for a buck. But listen, it's a good idea. It was just a genuine point about how does this fit with the overall strategy, and it's been answered. So thank you for that.
I totally understand, and we had the same questions, and I think this shows that we've taken each of these decisions as an individual basis, and where there are benefits, we have worked with public health to understand what the benefits are, and it has gone through spokes and corporate leadership team, and it has been thoroughly assessed as a right decision for this. I have Councillor Sharp and Councillor Ambrose Smith still. Anyone else wave at me at some point?
My question was it virtually exactly the same as Councillor Goldsack, so it's being discussed.
Thank you. And Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Thank you, Chair. The existing contract, shall we call it, ends in March 25. The new contract will come from that. For how long a period is will a new contract be for, please?
So I think we're still in discussion. We have to go now once we get a decision on this, we need to go to the approach to commission and the duration of the contract. We need to take it through our Public Health Commissioning Governance Group, which has representation from procurement and legal. Next, it'll go to CLT. So hopefully by the June committee, we should have a paper for the June committee on the duration and the approach to commission, which is
And if I may, Chair, and sometimes we have break contracts, so it's break period. So we go for, yes, you understand. We go from, we can break year 4 and so forth. Hopefully you'll include something like that in your deliberations. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's everyone. No one's waving at me. In which case we move to the vote. Co-opted members of the committee are eligible to vote on this item, and we're being asked to commission an integrated service across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough in order to maintain the stability of this service, to allow for improvements in delivery to be consolidated, and to avoid a dip in performance. This integrated model allows for greater efficiencies in management costs and greater resilience in the specialist elements of the service. Once the decision is agreed on this, further papers will be brought to CYP committee to consider the service model and what to include in the 0 to 5 and 5 to 19 elements of the HCP, and to the approach to commissioning, which will look at options, including Section 75 agreements, procurement using the new provider selection regime or in-house options. All those in favour, please. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Raj. We are now at 4:02. I'm going to take a 15-minute break and we'll come back. Yeah. If we're ready, please, committee. Thank you. Item 8. Item 8 is the Adoption Support Fund Purchasing Framework, and this report is introduced by Joe Banks, who's the head of the Regional Adoption Agency. Welcome, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm here to present a paper for the Adoption Support Fund Procurement Framework. And we're asking committee to approve the proposal for the implementation of a pseudo-dynamic purchasing system, but alongside that to delegate the authority to award. The report you've got makes reference to service director. Since submitting the report, I've been advised it would be executive director. So just if you could, I said it was told just to bring it up at the time. So part of that authority to award would be to decide on which providers would meet the criteria to join the framework, approve the call-offs, but also to award the contracts when a call-off from the framework has been identified to be the most suitable provider. So to get a little bit of background, I mean, you have read it in the report, but just to give background, the local authority does have a statutory duty to offer a range of support services for adoptive and special guardianship families, and such services will include therapeutic needs for children. The Adoption Support Fund has been set up by the Department for Education, and this provides funding to local authorities and regional adoption agencies to pay for the therapeutic services for adoptive and special guardianship families, and this has been in place since 2015. And at the moment, the current fund is remaining in place until March 2025. It's anticipated it will continue past that, but that isn't what's in place at the moment. So for us, as a regional adoption agency, we want to have an extensive list of providers so that we can call on anybody who is the best provider for that family when they need therapeutic support. And there's a very clear guidance on what those criteria are, and that's on the Department for Education's website. So working with the procurement team, we decided that a pseudo-dynamic purchasing system would be the best system in place for that. So it will allow us to be opened and closed as and when we need it, so we don't have a static list of providers we can keep adding to it. And I think that is really important for us. We're asking for the framework to be for 2 years, but then with the extension potentially for 2 lots of 1 year, which will therefore allow us to continue as any decisions on the Adoption Support Fund continues. So the aim of the system is to able to identify a list of providers that we can access therapeutic support from. We currently have about 100 providers that we call on an individual basis as families' needs come up, but we are constantly identifying new ones, and we do that in order to prevent waiting. There's a lot of demand for therapeutic support. There's a lot of providers who do have waiting lists, so we're constantly adding to it, and that's why we need it to be an open and closed system to be able to do that. For me, the system will only just give us a framework to be able to work that in, but it will also hopefully expand the providers that we've got available. And that, like I said, it's the flexibility that we need. I think that gives an overview, but I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Keep doing that. So previously we had early years on one of these frameworks. The committee approved that. From talking to various people, some of the applicants that went into the process, and thank you very much for providing the explanation of how this works, how the system works. The only thing that I can't see in it, because some of the applications on the early years, they found it quite hard to negotiate. So I just want to understand that there will be some help to the applicants to process the application, so they're not getting stuck or left behind on this new system.
Yes, so there's a plan in place that a member from the procurement team is going to run some live online sessions, is going to provide guidance. So we're going to contact all of our current providers that we use and run some team sessions, some kind of guidance on how to access the system. And I guess so that we can make it as easy and accessible as possible. We know it's very different to the way we do it at the moment. We're hoping for lots of providers, they're used to using these systems because we're not the only local authority that has this set up. So we're hoping that will make it easier. But yeah, the procurement team are very much committed to wanting to guide and take them hand in hand if needs be, particularly we use a lot of individual small enterprises, so which are literally just one person, they're not necessarily companies, so they may well need extra support.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you. And my point is very similar to Councillor Taylor's. I'm very mindful that some of the support provision that we offer, and as has been said, is very bespoke and they're very small organisations. So absolutely, I think we need support for those organisations to be able to access the procurement application system. Some of them may be perfectly well able to do it themselves, but if there are others from whom we would value support, then I think it would be very helpful if we can offer them that support to access the system. What I'm also mindful of is how very important this is, because our foster carers are undertaking a big leap of learning, faith, experience. Some of them have been doing it for a very long time and are very experienced and very knowledgeable and very capable. But particularly for new carers, actually having the specific support that they need at a time when they encounter a difficulty in their foster caring journey is really, really important, and it would help to protect us and maintain our foster carers. And that's really important, because anything we can do to retain our existing cohort of foster carers is really important. Thank you.
Just to clarify from this support isn't available for foster carers, it's only for adoptive parents and special guardianship families. So for foster carers to access therapeutic support, that would be through the clinical team within.
Thank you for clarifying that. The comments I have made nevertheless apply to the adoption, the community of adoptive parents. So absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Slatter, please.
Yes, it's a related question, really. I'm thinking of the foster to adopt pathway that is often followed, and particularly for those of the children who are our responsibility, who have complex needs. And sometimes they are then being adopted outside the authority, and just as our duties to them, continues beyond local authority boundaries, presumably some of the therapists and so on and advisors you are using or advising to use are outside the local authority. Can you give me some idea how widespread this you are operating? I'm glad you're doing some online, for example, but is that very common? A lot of out of county play homes?
So most of our adoptive placements and special guardianship placements will be within the local authority or within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, because we are still a remained shared service. But yes, so we do a lot of, so I think so far this year we have placed across both local authorities, I think it's about 18 children across outside of our boundaries. We have some children that are placed in Scotland. We have some children in Kent and Bristol. So yes, there is no boundary to join the framework. So for us, it would be about anybody broader than that. And the advantage of having it as that flexibility to on and off is that if we place some children within Bristol or within Kent and they need therapeutic support, we can very quickly support the providers to get on our system, so that that wouldn't be a boundary for them or delay for them being able to access therapeutic support. And they are quite often our more complex children who therefore would need adoption support much earlier in that child's placement.
Because they're sort of our children, we want that continuity, don't we? So you follow them, I take it. Thank you.
Yeah, the responsibility remains with us up until 3 years post the adoption order being granted. We have families the other way around where adopters might be in our local authority, but they're placed by a different authority, and we would still support them in accessing our providers, but would be funded by that local authority. So yeah.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else waving at me. Oh, sorry, you're waving. Councillor Ambrose-Smith.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Regarding length of time for the any new contract, you've got here 2 years at 2.11, 2 years. Is that too short, or is that, do you believe that to be the correct amount of time?
When I was setting this up with procurement, we had a lot of debate about how long, and in theory, you know, we could do it much longer. But I am very conscious that the fund is not agreed past 2025, and I think we need to be slightly mindful of not setting up a framework that would contract us with people much more than 12 months past the current end date. So for me, I think it seems sensible. It gives us that flexibility beyond just 2025, and it gives us the ability to extend, but it doesn't, I guess, for me, tie us in much longer than we necessarily need to be.
Lovely answer. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving to vote on this item, co-opted members of the committee are eligible to vote on this item. The committee is asked to A, approve the proposal for the implementation of the pseudo-dynamic purchasing system, B, to delegate authority to award to the Service Director for Fostering, Adoption and Corporate Parenting with the responsibility for the Regional Adoption Agency in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Children and Young People's Committee when deciding which providers meet the criteria.
Right. We need the meeting agreement to change to the Executive Director.
So Executive Director for Children, Education and Families, or throughout.
Yes, I think so. If that would require the consent of the meeting, obviously, because it's a change.
Sorry,
So-
the proposal is that where it currently in the recommendations says Service Director for Fostering, Adoption and Corporate Parenting, that should be replaced with the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families. And that in all 4 recommendations.
It's making sure Martin does his job. If we start again, sorry.
Sorry, does anybody object to that change? That's an amendment to the recommendation,
Yeah.
strictly speaking, a sort of drafting amendment, if you will.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll try and get it right. So B, to delegate authority to award to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families with the responsibility for the Regional Adoption Agency in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Children and Young People's Committee when deciding which providers meet the criteria to join the pseudo-dynamic purchasing system. To delegate authority to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families with the responsibility for the Regional Adoption Agency in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Children and Young People's Committee to approve all call-offs can be made from the pseudo-dynamic purchasing system when an opportunity arises at short notice. And D, to delegate authority to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families with the responsibility for the Regional Adoption Agency in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Children and Young People's Committee to award contracts when the call-off from the pseudo-dynamic purchasing system has been made and the most suitable provider has been identified. All of those in favour, please.
Sorry, that amendment of, I just want to understand it. Will the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families consult with the Service Director for Fostering, Adoption and Corporate Parenting?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Do proceed to the vote, sorry.
All those in favour, I'm not repeating them, thank you. And I think that's unanimous, Rashenda. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe. Item 9 is our finance monitoring report for January 2024, introduced by Martin Wade, our strategic finance business partner. Welcome, Martin. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm still on my own today for a change. It makes some pleasant change without John next to me normally to answer some of the questions. So we'll do our best. So yes, as you said, this is the finance and performance report to the end of January. And as you can see from the report, the overall core funded activity forecast overspend has increased to 11.8 million overspend to the end of that period. That increase is primarily due to the continuing placement costs for children in care, which are now in excess of £7 million overspent. To the end of January, overall numbers have remained reasonably constant in that area, but what we're seeing is that complexity of need within that area continuing to increase. And the composition of placements which are requiring more expensive placements, such as supported accommodation, continue to increase, which is obviously meant alongside those market pressures, those costs are increasing as those costs of those placements throughout the year. Elsewhere, the overall dedicated schools position, a grant position, has also continued to deteriorate. And again, a very similar theme on this area as well. The number of education, health and care plans have continued to increase at an unprecedented rate. And alongside that, we're seeing that complexity of need for those placements is continuing to increase, with more children both in special schools and also in our out-county education placements for those more costly placements. So a very similar kind of theme as we're seeing it with children looked after with our EHCP population as well. The other thing to be aware of around the dedicated schools grant as we're moving into the year end, there is an increased risk around our early years funding that we receive from government as part of the dedicated schools grant. Unlike the rest of our dedicated schools grant, which is set at a point in time based on the previous census data, the early years funding is adjusted based on 2 January census points. So we've obviously just had the January census point for 2024 2 months ago. We're waiting to see what that data shows, but we could see that there is a change in our early years funding, which may further increase the overall pressure on the DSG. Obviously, now we're moving into the last couple of months of the financial year, and obviously we'll be working on close down, and the view is to try and use applied grants and reserves where possible to mitigate the position changing any further from the one in the report presented you today. I'll pause there and attempt to answer any questions or points of clarity you may have.
With regard to the early years funding, does that have an implication with the changes in the funding criteria going forward from next month or not?
No, so effectively it's an annual adjustment that they make in terms of the overall early years block, just how they calculate the total pot we get. There is obviously going to be a challenge going forward with that new allocation, with the wraparound care and how that is going to be calculated, which is something I'm working with Annette and team very closely as to follow that through because of the amounts of funding involved in that. But obviously this just relates to the current financial year and the current funding as it stands at the moment.
Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate, Martin, you may not be able to answer some of these. So I'm looking at, what appendix is that? It's on page 102, appendix 2, and it's the strategic management, children and safeguarding. I'm just trying to sort of understand. So it's saying forecasted underspend due to unallocated budget in the strategic management budget and unused social care grant reserves from previous financial years. I just need to understand that and what that implication is to children and safeguarding. And then I've got another 2 questions as well.
Yeah, no, so that one really that's just a technical adjustment. So we had some historic social care grant that we've drawn down on, but rather than applying it anywhere within the service, we're just showing it as an underspend within that policy line, just so it can be seen there. So effectively what that's doing is helping to offset the overall pressures elsewhere within the service. Has no direct impact on service delivery. It's just a bottom line adjustment effectively to that overall budget line.
Thank you. Is it okay, Chair, to carry on? Sorry, I'm trying to work from 2 different devices. Page 106. So we're looking at send, it's number 11, send specialist service. So I think what I want to sort of pinpoint really is the education psychology service is forecasting a pressure of 338k. The service is experiencing increasing demand, which cannot be met from the substantive team and therefore being met through the use of locum education psychologists. What do you know what we're doing to address this? If we're using locum, are we not? So I'm presuming the substantive team is in-house team. Are we not looking at providing more in-house team?
Yeah, no, so yeah, there is something we are looking at in terms of the overall demand, and I think this is across the SEND service, and this aligns with what I was saying around the increase in the HCPs more generally. So as well as the education psychology team, obviously looking at the statutory assessment team and the overall resources which are required to meet that ever increasing demand, to meet our statutory requirements within those service areas. I don't know if Martin has anything more to add on that.
Yeah, recruitment of educational psychologists is a national problem for most local authorities, and unfortunately, the Ed Sykes working as an independent person rather than as part of an organisation for many of them is more beneficial. So it's really tricky. We are looking to recruit permanently as concurrently, but we need to address the demand at the same time. So we're looking at both.
Thank you. It's okay. One more question, Chair. Sorry. I've saved it all to the end. So I'm looking at page 10. So I've gone on to the capital position, Appendix 3 and 2B, Alconbury Weald, secondary and special. So the comment on that is slippage on the secondary school element. 1 million was budgeted for design work this financial year. Design work delayed as work is ongoing to confirm who undertakes delivery of the project. And then it says CYP committee to consider and determine preferred delivery option at its meeting today. So I just wanted to understand where we are with that. And I do believe it's not on our agenda unless I've missed it.
Yeah, apologies for that. I think that's an oversight in terms of the finance report. I'll have to defer that and take that away and pick that up with capital colleagues as to where we're at with that process. It's a shame Ian's left, otherwise he could probably answer that.
Fran was going to be able to answer that kind of question, so I'm sure she'll be able to get a briefing note to you on that one. Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you. Actually, on the same page as Councillor Taylor was on page 110, at 1C, we've got Waterbeach Newtown Primary. The spend in this financial year has it's not expected until March 2024. What we're there, I just wondered what's happening about that.
Again, I'm afraid I'll have to defer that to capital colleagues as to where we're at with that scheme. And my understanding, as I think as it says there, is that actually the spend this year is purely just on those initial design fees. Looking forward on that, but again, I don't know any more detail.
I've got Councillor Sharp next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions. And I'll start with the one that I think Martin's already answered, but I just want to make sure I understood it. In terms of when you were talking about the outturn, you were saying that we'd be looking at using grants and reserves to mitigate the situation. So is that where, in answer to, I think, Councillor Taylor's question, that's where you're holding them?
Yeah, exactly. So there's several areas. So there's the area there, and I think there's also a line further down which refers to some money we got transferred from adults in terms of mitigation as well to bring that in to mitigate that. We've also got some reserves that we're holding that normally we would draw down on for specific things. So again, we'll look at how we apply those depending on where the year-end position falls as we start to go through the close down process. Yeah.
Yeah, it's working now. Having great fun with the mic. Yeah, so going back on that, I mean, others might not agree, but I like to see the transparency of it all. So, you know, nothing wrong with using the grants and the reserves, but I think we should see the gross and the net position personally. The second question, and it may be more for Martin to answer than yourself, is doing a bit of maths. If I look at the children in care placements, we're looking at a pressure of 7.15 million. So that takes me to an outturn of 33.435 million. Looking at the papers from last time, we've got a budget for next year of 29.362. So we're looking at a pressure of over 4 million already for next year. And I know at the January meeting, there was talk about, you know, obviously looking at high cost placements and et cetera, but I just wondered how far we are with that. And then the third, I might as well do all 3. Then the third point is on page 103, we've got the integrated front door where we've got a pressure of 2.3 million, and it talks about agency staff and additional agency staff as well. I just wonder where the staff vacancy number is within here, because we do budget for a certain level of staff vacancies. So you may not be able to answer that straight away, but that's the 3 questions. Thank you.
Okay, so just in terms of the children in care placements, yeah, you're right. effectively where we are at the moment, what we do at this time of year is we do a roll forward exercise of all the children in care commitments that we have on the system, because obviously some of those commitments will have been for the first part of the current financial year and have ended, so won't obviously go into the next financial year. In all likelihood, though, because of what I said earlier about the increasing pressures due to the complex need, yes, there is likely to be a shortfall in terms of overall funding as we move into next year, but we're yet to quantify that based on the roll forward of those needs. I'll just pick up the other bit and I'll let Martin then comment on the other bits. In terms of the vacancy factor, we're currently in the process of working out what that final figure is for this current financial year. So we do it on a quarterly basis based on the vacancies within the different services. Obviously, because of the reliance on agency staff in a lot of these service areas, that vacancy factor has effectively been used to fund those additional staff. But when we do the final close down report, I'll make sure we include something which gives the details of what that finally comes out as for transparency.
Chair, before Martin comes in, just going back on that again, presumably we're going to see, again, for transparency, an overspend presumably on agency staff, and then obviously the vacancy factor will be a reduction because obviously I presume that's the way we'll show it, yeah?
Yeah, we can present it like that, yeah. Effectively, that's what we do throughout the year anyway. We basically offset the vacancies of substantive staff against those additional costs due to agency staff within the overall budget lines.
So going back to the placements issue, so we are tackling that a number of different ways. So hopefully that we won't go into the space where we were at the first half of this current financial year, where we had some super high cost placements. We've still got high cost placements, as Martin said, and some of those costs are increasing due to the complexity of the needs in a small number of children, but it is a small number of children. But looking at growing our in-house fostering cohort will help us enormously. So the more children that we can place with our in-house foster carers, first of all, they will be inside the Cambridgeshire boundary, and that will save us on additional costs such as time and travel costs. But more children we place with in-house foster carers means we're not paying independent agencies. So if you take out the super high cost placements or the very high cost placements, we can mitigate the costs of the overall children in care budget by placing children in care with our own foster carers. We have put in place a weekly external placements panel, which looks at the costs and the care plans for those children so that we can make sure that they're meeting the needs of those children at the time, and that expensive packages are being managed properly so that we can ensure that as the needs reduce, so does the cost of the care package to the council, so that we're responding to the children's needs. And it can go up as well, as Martin has already said, but we want to make sure that what we're getting is the best value for our young people. Our commissioning service is engaging much more constructively with the independent provider market, focusing on building relationships with providers that are inside the Cambridgeshire boundary as well, so that we can bring more children that are placed outside Cambridge back into Cambridge. We still have too many children placed outside of our borders. For the staffing element, we are making some significant strides in recruiting permanent staff. So almost all of our team manager cohort is now permanent. The agency staff for this current year, if you recall, also included an entirely interim leadership team, apart from myself and John Lewis. That's now finished, apart from the Service Director of Education, who'll be here for one term while we're doing the recruitment. The IFD is now almost entirely permanently staffed. So we are making some major inroads into the recruitment, and that will, over the course of the coming financial year, hopefully bear fruit, because as Martin has already said, the figures that we're looking at now incorporate figures from across the whole year. Integrated front door. Sorry, that MASH, that's what it meant. Did I say IFD? I'm so sorry. When I said IFD, I meant the integrated front door. Sorry, thank you, Councillor.
I realise that's what you meant. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? We've been asked to note this report. There's no vote required. Thank you very much, Martin, and I hope you didn't mind being sat on your own today. Item 10. Item 10 is the corporate performance report for Q3. Martin, the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families, will introduce this report.
I'm going to hand it over to Liz Clark, the Service Director for Quality Assurance and Practice Improvement, who has had the benefit of drawing out the nuggets of the report.
Welcome, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. And nice to meet everybody. Obviously, I started in post beginning of December as the Permanent Service Director for Quality Assurance and Practice Improvement. The report this afternoon then, which you have got a short report, but then obviously Appendix 1, which is all the data that kind of sits behind it. So this is the one related to Q3, so October, November, December last year. In terms of my understanding is obviously this is a selection of key performance indicators in relation to education, central and social care, including youth justice, which this committee then scrutinises and has reports on. In terms of for this afternoon, I need to give some, I suppose, awareness that given the absence of Fran Cox, I think the best thing in terms of predominantly things related to the education data and send information. If you have specific questions, I will capture those and we will respond as soon as possible in terms of those aspects. So again, apologies, it was unavoidable this afternoon for her to not be here. So I am aware, and this is the first time of presenting kind of this report to yourselves, that obviously the dashboard is kind of very clear in terms of direction of travel and the kind of RAG rating. So I'm going to sort of say, I'm assuming that people are familiar with the kind of layout then of the report and the appendix and not labour the point in terms of how it is kind of set out with the appendix. In terms of, it also does make reference to those indicators which will only appear kind of annually, that's on 3.2. And I can see that in terms of the conclusion of this report, obviously it particularly sort of talks about improving performance, and those are related. This is under section 4 of the short main report, which talks around that there has been an improvement in indicator 8 in terms of pupils attending schools that are judged as good or outstanding primary schools, and indicator 11, the percentage of 2-year-olds taking up universal entitlement, that being 15 hours, and those have improved from amber to green. There is an indicator that has moved from green to red. I am aware that the ones that I would call the children's social care ones, the 5 of them are all currently red, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions on those. In relation to the indicator that has gone, which is indicator 2, which relates to the numbers of child protection plans per 10,000. So whilst we have seen an increase in that in Cambridgeshire between the quarters, it is probably quite important. We do track obviously comparison data outside of this local authority. And in terms of the Eastern Region data, which is produced quarterly, we have the 3rd lowest number of children subject to child protection per 10,000 in the Eastern Region. So out of 11. So in terms of giving some context, I appreciate that obviously it has been mentioned that it's not necessarily always relevant to talk about other local authorities and their experience, but there is a kind of context sometimes around data, particularly in relation to children's services, that is helpful. So the one thing I would give kind of assurance of, whilst we have seen that increase, one of the things that we have put in place, and obviously that comes under my area of the service, is a schedule of audit and quality assurance work around our child protection figures. We have seen them go up slightly. And one of the reasons we need to interrogate them is we will look at kind of children's journeys. There's another indicator which is connected to child protection plans, children subject to child protection plans on a repeat or subsequent time within 2 years. And there's also an indicator that you'll see in the main ones around re-referrals. Now, all of that is tied up in looking at why our child protection numbers may have risen, because we track back where children are coming from and what their journey and experiences have been. We've also kind of very mindful of some changes in a revision to the thresholds document, which is the partnership owned document around the MASH and our integrated front door. And we also need to seek to understand whether we've seen any kind of movement or development in light of that. And I think that's mentioned in the narrative in terms of the referrals to the front door overall. So that's the main report. I am happy, obviously, as I've indicated, probably more capable of answering specific questions on things that relate to children's social care, but obviously to take anything else that people want to ask.
Thank you. Councillor Boulat, please. Thank you, Chair. This is related to schools, but I really welcome the indicator 8 improving, so the pupils attending schools that are judged as good or outstanding in primary schools, but equally, I'm really concerned seeing the indicator 9, so on secondary schools. And in the commentary there, it says that, of course, all secondary schools in the county are academies, and every school apart from 2 schools are part of multi-academy trust. And we actually heard earlier, of course, from the public question around the Australia Trust. We know there are very similar concerns raised by residents in other divisions as well, in addition to those that were highlighted by the councillor earlier today in the public question. And I guess, I'm not sure if this is more of a comment or a question, but is there anything we can actually do, given that we have so little control over academies as a local authority? Because it's something that is clearly coming from our residents in many divisions, and it's quite difficult for me as, you know, as a councillor to explain that actually we have very little control over this situation. And it does look, you know, really bad just looking at the direction of, I mean, it is unchanged, but like just seeing how, you know, if anyone sees this report from a public perspective, you see primary schools doing quite well, you see then the early years indicators, and then you see secondary schools doing so badly. So it's not surprising that perhaps our residents will ask, why is this the case for secondary schools? So that's like a kind of like more of a comment. Is there anything we can realistically do more than, you know, compared to what we already do? And then I wanted to ask a bit more detail around the indicator 6. So on children who are with SEND needs, not in education, employment and training, maybe a bit more detail perhaps of why we see this increase. And again, what are we doing in that space specifically on the NEET children category? Thank you.
Chair, thank you. Chair, if you would just come back. Because the question that I'm going to ask is similar to Councillor Boulat, so it would be good to have my view on it and then have that answered. So when you're looking at this indicator 9 and you're looking at it against our statistical neighbours and England, we are not doing well with our secondary academies. And that within that, there's 7 requires improvements. Where they say they are due inspections this academic year, within those 7, there are 3 in Huntingdonshire are RI, and 2 of those are in St Neots. So coming back to Councillor Boulat, we also brought this up to Jonathan Duff, Regional Director of the East of England in the Department of Education, whilst he attended CBIP meeting this year. Absolutely, I appreciate that. I would like to see the Ofsted reports from this Academy Trust, but I also would like to see something done about this. I know that we don't have that remit totally under the LA with our academies, but Jonathan Duff, as Regional Director, does. And I think we should be, as a committee, pushing this forward again to Jonathan Duff. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't agree with you more than I do. I think it's not acceptable that our secondary schools are performing at this level. I completely agree with you. And I was here when Jonathan Duff was here, and I heard what he had to say, and we continue to raise the performance of schools that are not improving at secondary level with the regional director and with the Department of Education. So we are continuing to do that. You're right to acknowledge the fact that we have limited powers over those schools, and we use what we have, which is really going through the regional director. We do have a school improvement team, and we do offer support and advice to schools in the local area, and we do challenge them ourselves about their performance and about their continued our continued wish for them to be good or outstanding, and what their plans are to achieve that. What we do have is also an opportunity. We are recruiting our new Service Director for Education at the moment, and one of the main focuses on them is about overall education improvement for children across Cambridgeshire, not just in the school's Ofsted grades, but in the overall educational outcomes for children, improving their attainment. So I am hopeful that we're having a different conversation this time next year, once that person's been in post for 2 terms. But we will continue to use what we do have and support you in putting pressure on to make sure those schools improve as best we can.
Sorry to hijack this, but can we, as a committee, put a proposal through to write to Jonathan Duff with regards to this? We have, and have we had a response?
I've had a response to some things, but not this particular issue. So we will revert back and see where we are with that. I will chase that for you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Goldsack next, please.
Thank you. There are many points I could raise on this, but I'm going to just focus on one. A lot of these I recognise, like the one that we've just heard from Councillor Taylor, you know, not all to do with the council. Indicator 128, I believe, is 100% within the council's responsibility, and it's the number of healthcare education assessments completed within a timescale. That's quite a plummeting service there, and it's not just a one-off month. That's now August, September, October, November, December. That's 5 months at well below 10% compared to the English mean of 49 and the statistical neighbour mean of nearly 32. When I look at the explanation on this as to why, the commentary, it waves a little bit of hope that for the last couple of weeks we've improved up to 50%. But I'd really like to know what we're doing about that, because to me that's a huge issue, and one that's there for us all to see. So I'd really like to know what our action plan is to address not just that, because I understand there's recruitment issues, etc., but if we keep doing what we always keep doing, we'll get the same results.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up and agree with you. And as you can see, there is a bit of a up and down trend throughout the time frame going back to 2020, although at the moment it is the lowest it has been, and I completely agree and recognise that there is at the moment a high degree of absence in the team due to staff sickness, which is not helping the situation. But we have agreed additional support for the team to come in, so a substantial number of posts to help support the improvement of this measure. We are, with the interim Service Director for Education, who started last week, we're going to be looking at the processes that we have in place for EHCPs to see if we can make that process more efficient, because the more children should have their EHCPs within the correct time frame. It will reduce the number of cases that go to tribunal. So with a combination of additional support going into the team on an interim basis to cover the sickness, and with an entire system review, we will hopefully get there. But it's not going to be improved in the next couple of weeks. It will take some months. There is a new team manager in that team, Emma. She's doing a very good job, and she's come from a local authority where we have confidence that she can improve this. But at the moment, there are some practical impediments to the number of people that we've got in the team, as well as the ever-increasing demand for EHCPs, which is going up at 17 to 20% a year. So there are complex factors, but we are able to address some of those within our power, such as the staff sickness.
If I can come back, Chair, through you. An EHCP is, would you agree, an EHCP is quite likely the first or one of the earliest involvements in a person's life with local authority. And it's setting a precedent. That's what I'm worried about here, of involvement with local authority and our ability to support them and deliver them then, what they need. So I welcome your comments. I would like to see, as a full member on this committee now, I would like to see this focused on with some narrative, perhaps as part of the action log going forward, because it's great to say you've got the funds for the recruitment, etc., and you can do things. We all know there's not a shelf full of people with the skills required that can come in and fill this. So you've got to fill it somehow. Because carrying on at the current run rate from we could go back to a year, but that is quite a decline. And we need to get back up to 30, 40, even 50%. But even then, I always relate statistics to a very simple one. If that was the same statistics on childbirth for midwives dropping a baby, that means 1 in 2 is getting dropped. At the moment, we're at 9 out of 10 getting dropped. It's unacceptable.
You're not going to find an argument with me on that. I agree with you. You triggered a thought in my mind and now it's escaped, unfortunately. I'll come back to you when I've recalled it. Oh, that's right. Next week, one of the other tasks we've been doing to support our EHCPs is we have a new database. So we don't have amazing data quality at the moment. We'll go live with a new database next week called CACI, which will give us a better handle on the data and with the journey traffic of those EHCPs through our system. So that goes live at the same time. We've been doing a lot of data cleanse and upload over the past few weeks and months as a local authority, which has taken up quite a lot of time, but we need to make sure that we've got the right data. The focus of the EHCP performance is also central to our safety valve performance as well. So it really is a council priority and an officer priority.
A reason, I'm sure the chair will indulge me, really, if we could put this on forward on the log for something to come back to us as a progress report, because I really see this as a foundation issue for so many other aspects of our delivery.
And it is on the risk register as well at risk 3. So yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. It does come obviously in the quarterly report, but like you say, it needs more regular. It does get reported on in the SEND Improvement Board as well, but more than happy for it to come as a regular item on the action log. Thank you. Councillor Bradnan, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to take us to page 143 and indicator also 132, which is the percentage of persistent absence in all children. I appreciate this only takes us up to the end of March 2023. We don't have the more recent data, and of course that will still have been affected by the COVID pandemic to some degree. But what I wanted to ask is, what action are we taking to work with parents and carers to address what is actually absenteeism? I appreciate the narrative and the commentary about the reasons for it, but what action are we taking to encourage parents to encourage their children back to school?
Our attendance team work closely with schools to encourage parents to get their children back into school. There are a number of projects going on at the moment to support schools, more specifically with parents that are on their roll and not in attendance. We know we've seen an increase in children that are electively home educated, and whether that is always appropriate, we can't be totally sure because we're not in their homes teaching those children. But we do have a really robust process for tracking those children and those children that are missing education entirely. So we do not, for example, children that are missing education, we don't close those cases. When we've done the checks that we're required to do, we continue to keep those cases open so that we can check on them throughout the year, which is above and beyond what the statutory guidance tells us. So we do have robust things in place to support children to return to school. But I will also have a look at this data because they're out after this meeting, because the graph seems to be telling us some quite old data, and I want to see where that is.
If I may come back briefly, are you saying that even if parents have said that they are electively teaching children at home, they stay on our register, and so their absence is adding to the figures here?
No, I was just trying to reassure you that there are multiple strands about how we support children that are not in school, whether they're in school and not attending, whether they're missing education entirely, or whether they're electively home educated by their parents. There are multiple strands. They're not all going to influence this percentage, but I just wanted to reassure you that whatever category of children is, however children are not accessing their education through the school system, whether they're on roll and not attending, we are supporting them and tracking them.
The reason I'm concerned about this is because it's undoubtedly a reason why our children's performance is lower than we would wish. Thank you.
Not being in school is obviously has a huge impact, but it is a national issue as well. It'd be interesting to track the national absenteeism and the data for secondary schools, but we can pick that up later. Councillor Slatter, please.
Thank you. On indicator 5, I would like to do a quick commendation, because reading between the lines where we're talking about children with complex and challenging needs actually being adopted, and possibly more than in other places, each of those is a big story of a lot of commitment. I just wanted to, just appreciate the work that goes into that sort of thing, hidden in the small print. The other one is back to, I'm afraid, EHCPs, and the relationship between that and the SENCOs, because I remember when we were talking about the safety valve, we were putting a lot of faith in being able to do better in mainstream schools and get help in the identifying needs and helping them even, before or instead of an EHCP. And there's some discussion about that sort of interim period where the teachers may have been alerted to some way in which a child might not be benefiting from what's going on, or might be glazing over or whatever, that they're missing stuff. I couldn't read the board for many years. People realised I needed glasses. But there's something much more serious, obviously, normally. Capturing that statistic must be very difficult. But we are talking about people who are now parents are wanting the full works, and is that maybe something that we are delaying because we don't need it? Just wondering, really, and if you've got to capture that. Thank you. Very muddled question, sorry.
No, I don't think it was muddled at all, actually. I think in terms of those children who are SEND support, which is what you're talking about, so those children where they do need additional kind of support, they've been identified as that, but they haven't kind of reached the kind of threshold for that more than the 12 hours a week that the school would kind of sort of provide. It's what they used to call in old terms, they still use it, K-code children, so they're coded as K. We do have that data as local authorities kind of from schools. But yes, that is the cohort of children who, some of whom will not need an EHCP and do not need to kind of be considered to be sort of put forward for that, because they can manage on that additional support. So I think there is a wider set of information than the indicators, obviously, that are in the performance report. But I think the overall kind of sort of question that's been given, I think that links back to having a more robust sort of set of information and narrative around what's kind of happening with our numbers. But I can certainly kind of pick that up as a question around what do we understand about SEND support children. And our new, Martin touched on it, the new database. One of the things that's really helpful is for us to also understand, I think, another councillor kind of alluded to that we need to understand exactly the cohort of our children who are open to targeted support, who have an EHCP, the children who are SEN, the children who are CP, and the children who are looked after. Now, we know those data's in pockets, but I think more comprehensively understanding that for Cambridgeshire will be really helpful. I did want to kind of pick up very briefly, you mentioned about children being adopted, our adopted data being really positive. It's not indicators you get here, but I would like to say that in terms of Eastern Region data, children who are leaving care because they are adopted and children who get a special guardianship order from care, we are by far the highest in the region on both those counts. So Joe has gone, but the work there is, you know, there are some real kind of sort of shining lights. And I think, again, as an assurance to this committee, you have some very specific sets of performance data. Just as an example, for children's social care, we have a performance monitoring group fortnightly. We have 40 lines on our risk log of data that we're tracking, that we're auditing, that we're pursuing. So there is a lot more in terms of the interrogation of the information and also the quality of practice that sits behind it.
Your Chair, just to come back on that, if indeed, and I would support it coming to us, and I think you said it was going to be on the agenda plan now, to even have a glossary into, I know I've been educated by the parents who've been through the system, in terms of these interim sort of subcategories to have some understanding. It might not be called Ks anymore. I'm sure they're called something else, but for the special needs and trying to get our numbers better as well, to understand what's going on. That would be very helpful for members, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that everybody? I'm saying a yes, in which case we're being asked to note this. I think, yes, we are. So no vote is required. Thank you very much, Liz. Item 11. Item 11 is the Children Education and Families Directorate Risk Register. And Dee Revens, who is our Governance Manager for Children Education and Families, is going to introduce this. Thank you, Dee.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Dee Revens. I'm the Governance Manager across Children's Education and Families. Part of my role is to help to support to manage risk across the Directorate. The committee receives risk reports twice a year. This is the second report this year. Last year was in June 2023. We do have a set of risk management procedures, policies and processes that we have to follow. One of which is we have to do our risk score against our impact and probability across 5 key areas. We currently have 9 strategic risks on our Directorate risk register at the moment, which you will find as Appendix 1. 4 of those are 16, rated as risk score 16, which is the Council's risk appetite level. And these risks have gone on to additional actions and have been escalated to our corporate leadership team, have been discussed, accepted, and additional action plan has been put in place for each of those. And the 5 remaining are within the range of 12 to 15, which is amber, within our tolerance level. So the covering report shows a comparable in terms of where we've come from in terms of June 2023 to now. Some of those risks have been updated, some of the language has been reworded, some of it reflects our new leadership team that has come in place more recently, and we've reviewed and redevised some of those risks, and some are new risks. And just to note that obviously these risks do change, they are regularly updated, they are regularly reviewed. So I'm just open to any queries or questions, unless you want me to go through each of the risks separately. Okay, thank you.
Queries and questions, please. Councillor Boulat first.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question on risk 4, which is around workforce skills and capacity. There is a point there on international social worker recruitment about developing an approach to recruit international social workers in the future, and noting that some social workers who are recruited internationally started in January within the team. Now, I'm sure you're aware that yesterday the government implemented the new changes to the immigration rules, banning social workers to bring their family dependents to the UK, which in my personal view, it will only discourage the numbers of people applying if you have to leave your children or your spouses at home when seeking employment in another country. So I might be wrong on this, but if this is the case, does it mean we actually have to even try even more to train locally if we expect a reduction in the numbers of people who would consider applying to those roles internationally? And how would this be reflected, I guess, in the risk register, given the changes now implemented in terms of immigration rules in the UK?
I could pick that up. Yeah, I don't doubt it will have an impact on people, on the attractiveness of coming to work in the UK. We have been looking at, we've been doing some work over the first 3 months of this year. We've had an enormous amount of interest from international social work colleagues about coming to work for Cambridgeshire, which has been really, really exciting. We set ourselves a target of 24 recruits for over the course of the year, because they also need additional support and training at the same time. I'm still confident that we'll achieve that, but I do think that it's going to be more difficult. Alongside that, we have we launched our carer. Other things that we're doing to recruit permanent social workers. We launched our Care Academy in November, which came here as well, and that is supporting an increase in our number of ASYE or newly qualified social workers, as well as increasing the numbers of social work apprentices that we have. So there are multiple strands that we're doing to try and recruit social workers, as well as all of the mainstream stuff that we do, and trying to improve the profile of Cambridgeshire, and make everyone aware of what an attractive place it is to work.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Goldsack next, please.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Boulat, really, the recruitment is a key issue. We can see this, and skills within our area. Could you tell me what the County Council is doing in relation with of working with the Combined Authority, who are the arbiter of skills, and therefore they own skills provision? So I'm just trying to see how that jigsaw meets. Hopefully it's meeting somewhere in the middle, because what I see is a new university coming up to speed in Peterborough. I see relatively new universities, and we've got the probably greatest university city in the world. And I'm just wondering what we're doing with regards to growing our own skills for future support and provision.
Yeah, and that's exactly the role of the academy. So we are trying to build those close links with their education establishments across not only the county, but also the whole of the eastern region, because we know that the universities are dispersed. But working for Cambridgeshire is hopefully and becoming a much more attractive prospect for people as we reduce the number as we increase the number of permanent staff we have. Then the more sustainable our workforce is, and the more efficient we become. So I've set the target for us as a Children, Education and Families Directorate to have to reduce 30% roughly. It changes all the time, but you can roughly about 29-30% of our staff are agency at the moment, and they're largely based in specific areas of the service. So at the front door in our assessment teams. My target is that by the end of this coming financial year, that we've reduced that to 15%. There will always be an element of interim where people are on maternity leave or long-term sickness cover, but that I want to reduce it by half what it is now. That'll have a real benefit for us in terms of cost, but it will also be really good for children. They won't have to keep retelling their story, and they will have a relationship with a social worker that will see them throughout their time with us. That's the aim. And then if we achieve that, then we'll have another target the next year.
Everything you said there, fantastic, really good news. If I can just come back to what I thought my question was, and then maybe I didn't put it right, which is, so what are we doing to work with the Combined Authority, who own well, they don't own, we all have a responsibility for it, but have the responsibility for skills, as in the development of future need? Now, you mentioned the academy, right? Is that the answer?
For social work, the only place we have a real pressure is in social work, in children, education and families, and the academy is the answer. Where it's going to link up with the Combined Authority is something we'll have to take away and have a look at.
Okay, if I could ask you to I don't want to be prescriptive here. I think we should be doing this as a matter of course. You know, the Combined Authority is we have a multi-tiered local government structure, and we have an upper tier, which is the Combined Authority. We should be inputting to them what our skills needs are, and then asking them and working with them to devise the requirements to meet and fit them. With respect, I think Councillor Boulat made an excellent point on recruitment of non-UK nationals to come in and fill this gap. But, we should be growing our own, ready to fill that gap, to really lessen that burden on immigration as well.
I can mention we are working with the Combined Authority on some very specific skills projects, particularly around our care leavers and getting them into further education slightly later on, because quite often they need that extra time. So there are some really specific and exciting projects where we're looking at wider skills, not merely social workers who are brilliant, and we do need more, but there are more skills conversations going on across. I have Councillor Daunton next, please.
Yes, in the interest of time, I'll try to be brief. Risk 3, is that a reference to the capital programme, or is it broader than that? And then very briefly, we talked earlier about the poor performance in secondary schools. Okay, those were academies. Is there any element of risk to us in that poor performance?
So risk 3 is specifically related to our safety valve agreement with the Department of Education, where we have a forecast for our to reduce our high needs overspend over the course of a 2-year period. And we are working with the Department of Education at the moment to look at how we can reprofile our forecast, because at the moment we're off track with where we said we'd be due to the increase in demand for our EHCPs. So that is very specific risk 3, not to do with the capital programme. The second point you made was regarding, can you remind me, sorry?
Yes, do we have any tangential risk on when we were talking about the poor performance of academies at secondary level? Do we have any tangential risk on that?
The report that we were looking at earlier was about the schools being good or outstanding. I don't think the council has a risk in the sense that they're all academy schools, but what we need to make sure is that the quality of those schools as assessed by Ofsted and the impact that that's having on their education, that's where the risk to us is. We want to make sure that Cambridgeshire children are achieving the best that they can do, and so we track their educational attainment, and we will be working with our schools to improve that.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the reply. So in terms of recording our risks and following our risks, I think what you're saying is there's no direct risk, but there's a risk if we don't follow it.
Yeah, and we are not towards the lower end of the performance for our young people, but also I think we need to be ambitious, and we need to be saying we want to be at the very top end of the national performance target. We are not at that top end. We are not near the bottom. So the risk would be you're lower down, but I think we should continue to be ambitious and work with our schools to make sure that we set high aspirational targets for all of our schools, and that's what we will be doing with our new service director.
Thank you. I think that's everybody I had noted. In which case, we've been asked to note this report, so no vote is required. You were pleased to know the final item on today's agenda is item 12, the committee agenda plan, training plan and appointments. Rishinda, any changes to the agenda plan, please?
No changes, Chair.
Any comments on the agenda plan, please? Councillor Goldsack.
Just a very quick one. We mentioned, and I'm not alone in being a relatively new member on this committee, although I have subbed a few times. If there's any such thing as a lexicon of 3- and 4-letter acronyms that slip into conversation, I'd be very grateful to receive them, rather than constantly delaying the meeting by saying, what does ABCD mean, please?
Agreed. I try really hard to know, and there's always some, but yes, we have got one, I think, somewhere. We will make sure. Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Slatter, please.
Yes, I was wanting to put this on. It's already been mentioned, and that is, is there any chance of having a return visit from the regional director? We've already said we were going to be communicating with him, whether we can actually ask him to come along and tell us how things are going, about some of the issues we've already spoken about, but other things that he could combine with a visit to Cambridge and us. Thank you.
We can certainly was going to say issue an invitation, issue a summons, give an invitation, whatever the correct phrase is, invite the regional director again, or indeed a written report from him. Next, sorry, Councillor Atkins.
Should we just advise about the reserve date in case members are unclear? My apologies.
Moving on to the training plan, before we invite comments, I'd like to remind everyone about the very exciting but very important safeguarding refresher training taking place on the 23rd of April, which will be on Teams, and hope that everyone can attend. Any comments or questions on the training plan? Nope. Committee appointments. Any comments or questions on the committee appointments? King Bashenda?
Thank you, Chair. Just a reminder that there are vacancies for a second member of the East of England Local Government Association Children's Services and Education Portfolio Holder Network, and also for a substitute member of the F40 group.
I'd like to propose that Councillor Atkins does these, unless anyone else has a burning desire. All those in favour? He didn't say no. Marvellous. Congratulations, Councillor Atkins. Sorry. Oh, I need a seconder, sorry. Thank you. That was quick, Councillor Taylor. Which almost brings us to the end of today's business. The April reserve meeting is no longer required, so committee will next meet on Tuesday, the 25th of June, and I now declare this meeting closed. Thank you, everyone.